All right, everyone, welcome to night 2 of the school budget review for 2026. Thank you all for coming back for another night of fun. And thank you, Tom, for answering our overnight questions. We got them back from Tom in email. We can discuss that a little further here. But before we kick it over to the school to kind of finish up anything left over from last night, let me ask if there are any citizens' queries out there. Seeing none. Yes.
Emily, if I may, the microphones in this room are only for those watching, so we have to project our voices. There's no amplification in this room, so these are solely for ICAM purposes. So we have to sort of amplify our voices so we can hear one another, especially with the blower
Sorry
going.
about that. I don't want to yell into anyone's ear at home. This is complicated. Okay, any citizens' queries out there? All right, once again, seeing none, I think we're good. So Dr. Blake, I know we kind of ended in a rush last night and, kind of to make sure that we had ICAM coverage, for the full duration of the meeting. Was there anything else that y'all wanted to cover slide-wise?
Nope, last night we were able to make it through our entire presentation in all of the departments. So Eric did a great job sort of summarizing quickly the last 3 slides that we had. So we did get through all of our material last night. So this evening we were anticipating answering any questions that folks had. And then we have obviously some other agenda items to work through as well.
We'll go over the override calendar. I presume we're prepared for that at some point. Okay.
In capital.
So if we could start just for public record, I know that we sent some, questions to Tom and Tom responded, but if, Tom, you could take a few minutes to run through those answers so that we could spend a little time on them and again, have them available for discussion, then that would be great. And then we can open it for general Q&A.
Sure. That's that cool? All right, thank you, and good evening. There were 5 questions that we had notes from last night. One was about the balances for the school district revolving funds. The second one was about state and federal grants going back to a couple years pre-COVID. One was the third one rather was the average cost per student. The next question was the net change in positions out of the total FTEs. And the 5th question that I had was the cost of building-based expenses that are being rolled or shifted into the central office budget. Those were the quick questions. As far as the balances for the revolving fund, I know that Diana had shared last night during the meeting or shortly thereafter the last monthly report. On a monthly basis, I provide a balance report to the school committee. So we had both shared, and throughout between Diana sharing it last night, and then I just incorporated into this afternoon's email the last monthly statement, which included the end of year balances, closing out fiscal 23 and closing out fiscal 24, as well as the monthly balances year to date. So that's that. The second question about what were some of the state and federal grant awards in some of the pre-COVID years. I went back to fiscal 17, and we could certainly go back as far as the committee may like, but went back 3 years pre-COVID, 17, 18, and 19, and that is in your material as well. Fiscal 17, the total of state and federal grants that Ipswich Public Schools received was $659,000. Fiscal year 18, my bad. going back in time, not ahead. Fiscal year 18, the school balances from the state and federal grants were $588,000. Fiscal year 19, $639,000. Fiscal year 20, $717,000, and then from 21 forward is on the slide material that you have in your booklets. The next cost is the average cost per student. I had provided a little bit of a paragraph there, and I really hope to not make what may seem like a simple answer a little complicated, but I wanted to be as transparent as possible. Looking at the simple math, one would just take the cost of the budget, divide by the number of students, right? So that is almost an oversimplification, but it's certainly fair for a citizen to do, easy peasy on the floor of town meeting, make that right, and you're going to land there. So I wanted to provide that number for what fiscal 26 would look like in just doing that as a snapshot. And in doing that, we would take our request of a $40,949,059 budget, divided by the number of total projected students for next year, which is 1,634. What we would need to do is the numbers that you see in all of our enrollment projections do not include out-of-district students, but the budget certainly does, right? Out-of-district costs for tuitions and special education services and transportation. So the budget includes those costs. We got to add those students back in. So that gives us 1,634. And that would land, just the simple math of dividing 1,634 number of students into a $40 million budget would be about a $25,000 per pupil expense. The reason why I say that's almost an oversimplification, because there's a lot of costs in that are not necessarily germane to the operation administration of schools. And the Department of Education, DESE allows us, or actually expects us, in the level playing field of the world that they do and we get audited against, they level the playing field and take certain expenses out of those to try to create a balance among what a per pupil expenditure across the state may be and developing comps for comparable districts and things like that. So, for example, any municipal service that the town and school district may share, but the state's view would be that that would be a municipal responsibility, is not borne and under a per pupil cost. So during the audit process, they will take that, and we do it first. We take those costs out. The other thing, it's also not as straightforward as you could imagine, that the cost of every grade isn't the same. Right? The cost of administrating buildings across grade levels isn't the same. The cost of putting on a second grade classroom isn't the same as putting on an 11th grade classroom. And that's just the things that are expected, the types of buildings. But when you just take the total number, divide it into the total number, you're making certain assumptions that the auditors expect us to really dig into. So with those sort of two examples, and I did include a couple of others, I don't want to rattle on too much, but our most recent audit, the auditors, which was then confirmed by the state, has as our per pupil cost of $22,925. So I hope that wasn't a really long answer to something that you thought was really quick.
I appreciate it, and I totally accept the idea that it's between $22,000 and $25,000. I'm okay with that range.
Okay.
And we'll talk about why in a minute. I'll let you keep going with
Okay,
your...
good.
Tom, could you just clarify the most recent audit year?
The most recent year that's been certified by the state is fiscal '23.
23, thank you.
Yeah. Fiscal '24 is in the hopper now, if you will, but we don't have the state confirmation back.
Thank you.
I'm sure we'll have that actually by town meeting, or we'll probably have it within a month or so. But we don't.
What's the uncertified number for '24?
I don't have that yet. We're still working with our audit team to be able to submit that. Yeah.
Oh, so it hasn't been submitted?
It hasn't been submitted yet. It's not even due yet. It's not due until the end of April, so
Got it.
we don't have it yet. Question number 4 was the net changes in total FTEs. I provided a snippet of all the schools and the custodians and the central office, which corresponds with one of the slides from last evening that shows the growth, the net growth, because the net was the question, shows a net growth in FTEs from fiscal '25 to '26 of 4.08. Question number 5 was about the building-based costs that are being rolled into the central office budget. There were three principal areas that we are rolling costs into, rolling costs out of the schools, I guess, into the central office budget. That would be special education, services and staff, the summer programming, an acronym known as ESY, Extended School Year, and a technology curriculum and a software. There's a total, and I also provided a snippet of a chart there for you, but the total cost of those 3 areas across the 4 schools being rolled into the central budget coming out of the schools is $538,883.
Thank you. So I'd like to take a few minutes for the Finance Committee to reflect on that and ask questions. I will start with them because I think the first couple were my questions. And then we will kind of ask overall questions. So thank you for providing the 17, 18, 19 state and federal funding amounts. My hypothesis was that, 2025 and 26 were kind of aligned to 17, 18, 19. And I'm happy to hear that we are at about $150,000 more still than 17, 18, and 19, but it's pretty clear we've returned back to normal. So I appreciate you finding those numbers. Also, average cost per student. So my concern here is, and this is coming from a financial point of view. This is not coming from a student point of view. It is our job to look at the long-term financial health. And my question is whether school choice is still of value to us. It looks like we're losing about $180,000 between what we get for school choice and what we spend. And so, that's why I asked for the average price per student to also kind of understand what the deficit was there. And that is something that I think I'd ask the school committee in general to respond to, because there is such a gap there, and every penny counts.
So while we opened school choice, we haven't got into like specifics of what that's going to look like, but that's an ongoing conversation we're having for the reasons you raised, but also hearing from our administration and trying to understand their recommendations as well. So finding that balance for sure.
Okay, and I recognize that this year, maybe you've already begun the process and committed, but it's something that I'd ask you to consider in future years because it is a fairly large deficit as far as I'm concerned.
Just before you leave that one, the way that school choice works is we fill a classroom, and so if you use those averages, if we brought another student in from outside the district, it brings that average down slightly because you have one more student in district, right? So maybe it brings it down by dollars. But you have the additional funding coming in. So we're not filling an additional classroom. We would never bring enough students in that we need another teacher. So we're only ever bringing the average cost down and then benefiting from the funds coming in. So your point about the net loss is correct only if you look at it on averages.
Okay.
We're not hiring any additional staff. There are materials, certainly, if we need another textbook or we need another Chromebook, that is significantly offset by the additional funds coming in from choice.
But we still pay more, just generally speaking, to support the student that we get in return, right?
No.
Okay.
Do you want to, yeah.
Can Tom?
Do you want to,
Sure.
Yeah, please.
I understand what you're,
Thank you.
yeah.
thank you.
So the premise of the school choice program, going back a couple decades now, is to support with supplemental funding schools and school districts that may have available space. It is not designed to in any way have a school district have to incur a cost because of that student coming in. So an example would be if we have a class size, a policy that says we're supposed to have 18 students in a class, to just pick some round numbers. And our typical class sizes are below that, maybe 15 or 16. So that gap between the expected class size of 18 and 15 in a class means that we can support that particular class in that particular year with 3 more students. Now, by bringing those 3 more students in, we're not hiring another teacher. We're putting all the lights on still. We're running the buildings and operating all of that. The students are, there's still we don't provide transportation, by the way, so that's not even a piece that the students have to get here on their own, if you will. So the purpose is not to have us incur costs that would be above or that would even come close to equaling. It's really to help fill empty seats, certainly not empty rooms. If we were to ever get to the point where we start having a loss, meaning that a school choice student that comes in is costing us significantly more than we're receiving, or really anything more than we're receiving, then we need to certainly, evaluate the program or evaluate where in the mix we may be able to allow students. And that's something that the school committee, I think that's what Diana was referring to, that the administration are working now and have been for the last couple of months to really decide where there may be available space. We don't just say we're a school choice district and it's K through 12.
Yeah.
We have to be able to pick schools and pick grades.
Got it, thank you.
So one way to think about it is so say we, like our budget's our budget. If we approve our budget, that's the number we're going with. And if we accept 3 choice students, we get that $15,000 sort of revenue in from their sending districts or from the state. But it doesn't mean we're spending $60,000 more for those 3 kids.
Got
Like
it.
our budget's our
I thought I
budget.
heard last night that we got $5,000 per
It's
student.
We do.
$5,000 per student.
Right, so we get $15,000, but our average per pupil spending is $20,000.
But that's just an equation. Like it's not,
Got it.
It's getting lost in
So
it just changes
if
We're
this
not
were,
hiring, we're not hiring teachers.
Yeah,
not
I
hiring
understand.
teachers.
The net doesn't increase staffing.
yeah. So it's a
just-
revenue stream. It's not
You
an
have to be
expense,
comfortable with
albeit
your
a small
class
one.
sizes, which is how you're kind of managing
Right.
things.
got it, okay, I understand, thank you.
Yeah, so mathematically, if we were to take all the school choice students out of the school district, we would still be employing approximately the same number of staff.
It would still cost us as much
Because,
to run the schools.
exactly. And so that's why, so school choice is a supplemental revenue stream that comes in. There's also a differential for special education students above the $5,000, which has a mathematical formula to it that's, I'm sure Dr. Oxford and I would love to explain to you.
Thank you. Those are all the questions I have on the 5 questions we sent overnight. I'm going to open it up to the committee, and then we'll go kind of, after we go through these kind of supplemental questions, we'll talk about the whole deck, if that makes sense. Does anyone have any feedback related to what Tom provided us, or questions? Go ahead.
Yeah, Tom, you mentioned that the school choice program started 2 decades ago or 3?
I bet it was 3, I think it was part of education reform in the early 90s, 93, 94, something like that. I can look it up, but it's certainly been a while.
I mean, it's crystal clear about, filling empty seats, and that's conceptually good. But I think since the reimbursement's been stuck for 20 or 30 years, it's time that the state should reconsider that and maybe not bring it up to what districts are spending, the 15, 20, 25,000, 30, but at least bring it up to 10 maybe, because it seems like to me that that program rewards districts for doing poorly, so their kids leave to go to nearby districts that are better. And even if those nearby districts get to fill a couple empty seats, and so we get extra money, that's good, as long as those kids coming in don't require any other services, no IEPs, no special diets, no extra psychologist visits or anything else. If they're just the average, whatever the average is that you guys call, in the 30% to 70% of kids, then that works. But if one of those kids come in and, once they're here, we have to take care of them. They're a kid like any kid.
That's right.
It becomes the burden that,
Yeah.
and it would be unethical to do anything but take care of that kid.
Yeah, and we would not be allowed to displace the student if he or she arrives as a first grader and they have a statutory right to stay through the 12th grade, and services would be incumbent upon the district to provide. Yeah.
Other questions? Go ahead, Rob.
Tom, excuse me, Tom, could you go through a number of these accounts, these account balances? Is it possible to pull this up on the screen?
Was it in a?
Yeah, so I guess I think it's page 9 of the presentation that's on the board here. And then the spreadsheet that Tom sent. I'm sorry,
Is that the one you mean?
yeah, that is the
So
one.
all of those accounts there would be, with the exception of the capital, the last two, would be referenced on the spreadsheet that I sent this afternoon.
Right. In FY '25, it shows you were using resources in those accounts, right?
Yes.
But the spreadsheet you're showing doesn't tie, it doesn't actually, some of the accounts don't change at all. Could you take a look at that?
Sure.
Or walk us through why that would be?
Well, some of the accounts wouldn't change because there would be no activity, not.
No, I mean,
not-
the accounts on the board there.
So these relate to expenditures. These relate to what we are charging into the account, not account balances.
Right, but we have monthly balances, which would show the expenses to those accounts, right?
That would be, yes, that would be if there were expenses to those accounts.
But there are, aren't there?
So are you talking about that, what's on the screen, or the worksheet from?
Yeah, comparing the two.
Well, I'm not sure that it's a reasonable comparison, because I don't think we're talking about apples and oranges.
What's been withdrawn from those accounts in FY '24, '25, and '26, and then what was provided as, that Tom sent last night, that's the actual balance, that's where you'll see the difference.
Yeah, but Sasha,
It's been taken out, so for special ed, for example, it was 90 last year, or this year, it's 97,000 coming out, but you can see the balance in that supplemental sheet that was sent.
And
but
I
Sasha,
don't,
when we're looking at the balance every month, why wouldn't we see reductions?
because we don't necessarily take out a charge every month. So most of those accounts, we would reconcile as we close the year.
So you don't do like accrual accounting or any accounting on a monthly basis against these accounts?
Correct. And we don't necessarily charge against these accounts on a monthly basis. We would charge as we close the year. For example, transportation, the second one down, we may not need to charge the $150,000 as the year closes. We may only need 140, and then I wouldn't necessarily charge off what we would need. These are based on an expectation of our expenditures for the year. And as we close the year, we would offset the appropriated budget, because each of these account has an appropriated budget, corresponding expense, corresponding line. So we wouldn't necessarily charge these expenses until we're closing the year. Now EDP and school food service are going to stand out as, and athletics. Those three will stand out as their own, and you're going to see lots of activity in the course of each of the months there, because those are not in any way have a corresponding line in the appropriated budget. Those are fully supported by their own activity. The EDP program, obviously, we take in our tuition and fees, and the entire program is supported through its staff and materials, and all of those charges at 100% are charged into that account each year. What these numbers, represent, the 192,000 in fiscal '26 and the 142,000 in fiscal '25, are costs to support the appropriated budget for expenses and the types of services that the EDP program uses in the schools, particularly our utilities.
So let me kind of jump in, because this, I think, is something that we're all struggling with a little bit. So in that chart, FY '24, Are those actual expenditures, or is that a budget number?
Those were budget numbers.
So
Oh, no,
it doesn't really tell us what you actually spent for FY '24 from those accounts.
I'd have to confirm that. Those are probably actual numbers from '24. I don't honestly remember.
Yeah, some of them are kind of round numbers, 150,000. I mean, it still could be that, but
Yeah.
so I think what we're trying to really grasp here is, since we don't have any numbers that show how much revenue is coming into these revolving funds on an annual basis. We don't actually have the numbers of what is actually going out. We have what you project may go out, but you're telling us.
That's the
may not
purpose of
know.
this, that's the purpose of this chart, is to show what we're intending to expend
Yeah.
from that account.
Yeah. So, we see line items where, like, the preschool revolving fund jumps from $30,000 in '24, $30,000 in '25, and next year it's going to be 250. And so we're sort of saying to ourselves, well, what's going on with that, right? And we're trying to understand, like, take that as an example. How much revenue comes in every year to that fund?
Sure. So that's a question that I can certainly answer. It wasn't asked, frankly, but it makes a perfect sense that it would be a reasonable question. If you look at the spreadsheet that was distributed, that just shows the end of month balances, you can see the preschool revolving account has $401,000 in it as of close for February.
So I think we're trying to ask
And
the question, maybe.
And the year opened with $357,000 in it. So the first half of the year, we've brought in, the net difference there, the $50,000 more or less.
And nothing was taken out of that account. at
It
the
hasn't
same-
been charged against yet, no. Those charges would not be made until the end of the year, or at a point during the year that we would need to do so.
So again, that just, it's confusing. And I think what we're trying to grasp here is, are we tapping into, many of these accounts have accumulated a significant amount of money, and we're tapping into them to this year. Sometimes we've done it in every year, but this year in particular, it seems like some of them are getting tapped pretty hard. And trying to understand, is that really a ongoing revenue that can be counted to support the budget, or is it a one-time cost that we're never going to see numbers? So maybe you and I can talk
So,
about how best we can-
that has been part of our substantive discussion for months, really for over a year, when we developed the fiscal '25 budget and began to hit those accounts, in a greater way. One of the things that we've been very mindful to do is to only charge on that list accounts that are recurring. It would be, frankly, inappropriate to charge a reoccurring cost to a fund that has sort of, one-time supports. And that's something that, just using the preschool revolving, account, we bring in, revenue through the collection of tuitions for preschool families, and we will be able to charge the amount of revenue, charge up to, and no more, obviously, than the amount of revenue that's brought in the course of the year, for that.
So you're bringing in more than $250,000 a year in
Yes.
that account?
Total,
Bringing in, new
bringing
revenue.
in, yeah.
So I guess maybe you and I can talk offline.
Sure.
And sort of figure out a good way to present that, just so we.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and however you would like it, we can certainly show reports and show, deeper detail. But I think both of you are raising an excellent point, and this has been a discussion among the administration and the school committee, that we are beginning to rely more on revolving funds. That's not lost on us. We've been saying that for some time. That's not lost on us at all, that in order to support the budget and support the services that the students and families need, we are needing to be able to hit these revolving funds as a legitimate source, and only with the type of expenses that would be germane to the reason why the revenue was brought in the first place. So it's not this, great, wash of money that's immediately at our disposal. It can only be expended for the purposes related to why the funds were raised to begin with. But you raise an excellent point. We are beginning, and in year two, or FY '26 would be year two, of greater dependence on these funds.
Well, it looks like you increased the use of those outside funds in FY '26, about $700,000 more than last year, right?
Yeah. Yes.
And, we heard a lot about your budget shortfall, right? Like from your original expectations to where you ended up, and had to make a significant number of cuts in the budgeting process. So I'm just trying to figure out, because your FTEs have gone up, right? You got 10 more FTEs this year than you did 2 years ago. So I'm trying to figure out, if you're cut $800,000, yet you have more staff, like where did those cuts come? I guess that's where I'm trying to understand. Or did you just add more money in outside sources?
Well, part of the oversimplification is we are tapping these funds to a greater extent than we have in the past. But we're not having, with the exception of the preschool revolving fund, that is paying for salaries. The other funds are not covering salaries, but they're covering, services, utilities, things of that nature. Obviously, transportation pays a supplemental bill to the bus company. The Burley Fund is for libraries. EDP is 100% paying for itself. And the number that you have there, as I mentioned, the 192 for EDP, and two numbers below that, the 237 for school food service, are being charged amounts that they can afford to help offset the cost of the operation of the buildings while those programs are running. EDP after school, of course. What is the approximate cost of keeping the buildings open till 6 o'clock at night versus having them close at the end of the regular school day? So there's a piece to that. The same thing, or related, on the school food service, anything that goes to the administration and operation of the kitchens, supplies, materials, heat, gas, water, things that are legitimate, and we back ourselves into that on a square footage, basis. We don't have separate meters in the kitchens.
I don't think anybody is suggesting, I know you're appropriately sensitive to that issue. I don't think anybody's suggesting that these funds aren't being allocated properly. I'm sure they absolutely are. But to the extent it can offset a cost that's currently in the budget, that frees up money in the budget for something else you'd like to do, right? So, and then in addition to this doesn't cover the Payne grants
It does
as an
not.
outside. So there's,
not. Yeah.
what do we have, 2 or 3 positions that we're hoping to fund?
There were 2 positions that are being applied for a Payne grant within days. The applications are due. Yeah.
And those are in your FTE count, right?
They are in the FTE count, but they're not in the cost of the
Not
budget. Yes.
Yep. Thank you.
And just quickly on the FEFIs, or the Payne Grant Trust, has the purpose of the trust changed by the school committee in the last year or 2 years? So when I was on the Payne Grant Committee the last 5 years, we couldn't replace we couldn't pay for a position that the taxpayer should pay for. Is that how are you looking at these positions that are being introduced to the Payne Grant as an option based on that logic?
We are currently reviewing the policy. It's probably not going to be updated this round, but by next year. So that's not a direct answer to your question, but the policy currently has a lot of wiggle, and we're just trying to be able to answer questions like the one you just asked.
Okay. And I guess connecting to Jamie's conversation here, Tom, I'm not sure I'm following the outside funding, but the chart that you gave us here with the school stabilization fund and then the special ed reserve fund, you know, it does, could you tell us what the FY '26 budget uses of both those funds? I think that's probably the real question I have.
Sure. So the special ed stabilization fund, which is the last line in the chart, starting with the number, code number T31,
Yeah.
it has a balance at 687,000.
Yep.
You're seeing in fiscal '25, we've asked, in part of last year's process, we used 312. And in fiscal '26, we were asking to use 100,000.
So what's puzzling about the spreadsheet here is the Special Education Reserve Fund starts the year at 623,000, then goes up to 700,000, which ties to special town meeting. And then there doesn't look like there's any real spend in that account except for 20,000, basically year-to-date, or fiscal year-to-date. So how are you using 300 if we only see 30?
So we, the school district, haven't charged anything into that account. So these balances that you hear, these two accounts aren't at our discretion to manage, right? They're under the management of the town treasurer's office. So we actually haven't asked to withdraw the 312,000 yet.
Oh.
I would anticipate doing that as the year closed. So in the fourth quarter, when we're winding down, we get to the middle of May and we're beginning to get very, very tight in closing the year. That's when I would begin to tap these funds to charge in exactly what we needed to obviously keep the appropriated budget whole and not, overextend what we need. So there's been no charge on the the Special Education Reserve Fund. There's been no charge into that yet.
Okay.
Last year's FY '25 approval process allowed us to tap it for 312. We've not yet asked to do that.
Are you getting interest income allocations?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
'Cause
that's
obviously
gonna be-
a sizable number in those
Correct.
funds, maybe, again, if the town treasurer's touching the account, it could be a positive by him
Correct.
applying interest to it.
Yeah, and we can track that. When we run a report out of Munis, we can see what those activities are that when the treasurer
That's-
would have
that's the
applied
only
interest.
really- You guys don't touch it, you touch it at the end as part of the budget process.
Correct.
But he would potentially be doing
Correct.
that type of
Yep.
stuff.
And the same would go for the T29, the school stabilization, which isn't referenced there, but obviously spoken to. It's not on the top of that slide, but it's spoken to as part of, the calculator and what the expectation using from stabilization. Once the town meeting approves the use of stabilization, that money gets effectively allocated on July 1, and it appears as a budget allocation as part of our total, allowance for the year. The town contribution plus the stabilization equals the $40 million budget. So we don't interact as a school district. I don't interact with those funds at all on our own.
Okay. So we haven't asked any questions yet on special education, but would you mind saying again the dollar amount in the FY '26 budget that would tie to the revolving fund for '26? I think you said 300 and something thousand.
So, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, up from the bottom, the circuit breaker special ed reimbursements. Is that the fund you're referring to? That's a special revenue fund, but we include it on this list as an outside source. It's not a revolving fund per se, but, so how that works, is that what you mean? How do we get a reimbursement from the state, and then how do we charge into that?
No, I was getting back to to the balances you have here. So you have the school stabilization fund, which isn't on the screen, but was previously discussed. And then we have the special education reserve fund, and I'm kind of missing where that's on the screen.
The Special Education Reserve Fund is the third from the bottom. Special Education Stabilization Fund. You see in fiscal '25, the column where we asked and town meeting approved use of $312,000, which we would ask for as we close fiscal '25. We'd have to ask, the town finance office or the town treasurer on
Yeah.
how to actually access those funds. That's not something that we have direct access to, but I have that sort of in my back pocket, knowing as we close the year, we have $312,000 for that purpose. And next year, the request in the fiscal '26 proposal is to access $100,000, which we would use in following practice in closing fiscal '26 in, May or June of '26.
Yeah. So you'll have at least $250,000 in that account, right? Unless at town meeting, are you moving anything into that account? Do you have any articles on
That
that?
is not the plan, no.
Okay. Good, thank you.
Can we just go back, Rob, to your point about the Payne grant not funding FTEs that could otherwise be paid by taxes? I just want to clearly understand, is the risk that Payne will just deny it because it could be otherwise funded by taxes? Or is the risk that Payne could approve it and we could be not following the?
Right.
Yeah, so the heartburn that came up last year over the funded faculty positions was because of that question. And I think the reason that the school committee policy group is reviewing the Payne grant policy is because of all the heartburn that came up last year around the salaried position. Maybe not, but for instance, like one of the positions was a literacy coach. And we went back and forth a lot on, well, a coach is kind of a special, like, they have a very specific purpose and it's supposed to be just for a one-year thing, but it's still a paid position. And we spent hours going back and forth on that one point. And the reason that I brought it up last night with respect to the health coach for the elementary schools is because just with the same group of people from last year coming into this year, I think that kind of a position specifically will be at risk of the committee saying, no, this is not within the spirit of the Payne grant because it's something that is required and needs to happen regardless. So it's not something that a couple people,
Yeah.
at the very least, will be comfortable approving.
It's,
So I just want to clarify what Diana said before. Obviously, the policy is being addressed, but for this grant cycle, where we landed, is that it does not explicitly state that staffing positions cannot be funded.
Correct.
So there's no reason why this year that wouldn't be something that we would be able, that the committee would be able to approve, because it does not explicitly state that that should not happen. It certainly needs to be addressed. There's a lot of ambiguity, not related just to this. So yes, to your point, this piece will be addressed, but there are a lot of other pieces that need to be addressed. But there's nothing that precludes us from being able to support those staffing positions in this grant cycle.
And I agree with that, but I think the overarching purpose of the FEFIs is to fund things that enhance and enrich and are innovative. So I think, at least since I've been on the school committee, the positions that have been funded through the FEFI grant, the Payne grants, are not, a first grade classroom teacher, because that, is sort of part of the core budget that should be funded from the appropriated budget. But it's things that maybe are new programs, like I believe there was a computer science teacher and we didn't have that program, so it was sort of a new program, we were piloting it, it was an innovative thing. So there is a precedent of having sort of new or innovative staff positions funded through FEFIs, and there is nothing explicitly in the policy that says we can't do that. But one of many reasons we're looking at the policy is we've gotten into a situation where, you know, we don't really want to fund those things indefinitely through FEFI money, but then we also don't have the capacity to just always roll those into the budget, because then our budget just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger in FTEs. So that's sort of one of the things we're trying to grapple with. But Haley's right, there's nothing explicitly that says we can't fund staff positions, but I think that overarching FEFI purpose of innovation, enhancement, and enrichment still holds true.
Thank you. I appreciate the conversation.
So just to complete the steps, if the Payne Grant Committee rejected the investments, they then go to the school committee, and the school committee can override that investment. So as long as the investment is teed up by whatever date the Payne Grant requires, then really the school committee can make the call.
Who funds the overridden, if it gets denied and
Well,
overridden?
the FEs, the money is the school's money, so the school
Okay,
committee.
got it.
So it's, you know, it's separate and distinct, but, you know, the Payne Grant folks are, I mean, two of them are residents. You know, there's a school member, a finance committee member. There's a chair, I'm not sure how she gets there, or in my time. Who else?
I'm the chair right now, Rob.
Oh, great.
I'd love
So-
to join this conversation if you want me.
Well, that's another thing that's a little murky in the policy, and it's another thing we're addressing in the policy. There's not really an explicit circumstance if the Payne Grant Committee doesn't fund something. Does it go to the school committee? Can we override it? It's not in the policy.
Oh, okay. I thought I could
And
get you there, Emily.
Well, I appreciate the conversation. It may be one that we have routinely as this evolves, but thank you. Other questions on the supplemental information? Go ahead, Ken.
Tom, is the athletic revolving account up on the screen? Is that the same line item as R02 on your spreadsheet? High school athletics?
I'm going to say a yes, but let me confirm that. You mean what's in the budget book? Is that what you mean?
No, you sent a spreadsheet for balances of revolving accounts by the month.
Yes, yeah.
Because I'm just looking across on that particular one with a high of 138, almost $139,000 in August of '23, up to February of '25, down to $87,000. And it doesn't, I mean, yet there's $244K in the fiscal year '26 budget. So,
Yep. So that is in addition to, I think I may have mentioned that there were three funds here that specifically operate on their own. So that $244,000 relates to what's on page 71 of the budget book. So that is the collection of fees and any other supplemental income that the athletic program may raise for the purposes of funding the items that are in the budget, which is pretty much assistant coaches' salaries, some transportation work, and some supplemental things beyond what the appropriated budget pays for.
so that line item up there is not the same as fund code R02?
It is, yes.
Well, the numbers don't add up, but
Well,
you can,
so you
I'll
certainly
talk to
see,
you offline on it.
yeah,
I don't
but
want
you
to
see,
commit.
yeah, you see there that there are different balances every month.
Yep,
Money's
absolutely.
coming in and out. So
Yep.
that 244 would represent what the aggregate use throughout the year would be. And again, you know, that's one of the things that we talk about with showing end-of-month revolving fund balances. It's a snapshot in time. It's not necessarily a reflection of, it can change literally every day, which is both an advantage to the capacity for school districts and municipalities to have revolving funds, but it also makes the snapshot in time look, not be able to relate exactly to what you're saying. if you want to ask the question, which I'm assuming is there capacity throughout the months to support revenue of $244,000?
Assuming the answer is yes.
The answer is yes, yes.
yes.
And we can certainly, represent that in any way the committee may like. We can show what revenues have been and what expenses have been in a very detailed way. But yes, the extended day program, school food service, and athletic revolving are all driven exclusively by the amount of revenue brought in through fees, tuitions, fundraising, whatever that revenue stream may be.
So on
And gate receipts, trying to,
Yep.
yeah.
So the spreadsheet that you did distribute, that just has the balances, it wouldn't be that much of a big deal to have income and outcome, because income and expenditures, because the one subtracting from the other is what your balance is each. Yeah.
That's right.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions on the supplemental? Go ahead.
On school lunches, are they still free to the students?
They are.
And so is what we're seeing a reflection of us, are we getting reimbursed?
We are.
What's the net impact? Profit, loss, break even?
Oh, well, we're certainly well ahead of the game. I mean, the state and federal governments have, in the 100%, reimbursement era that we're in, is showing some significant, balances in school food service for accounts all across the country.
I guess, do we expect that to persist would be the next one.
Well, we're only able to, and I think maybe back to a comment, just, putting on my best Jamie Fay thought, that we can only begin to tap into that to the extent that the revenue continues, to be there. We did not realize this type of revenue when we were charging school lunch, when we were charging students, at the point of sale. So if the state or federal government were to ever discontinue the 100%, reimbursement for a school food lunch program, we would have to dramatically, differently look at this, because we would not realize that sort of revenue by charging, at the point of sale.
Okay, unless there's additional questions, okay, I'd like to move along to everything we reviewed last night, although I know we asked questions as the presentations were happening. I just wanted to make sure that we cleared up any other questions before we move on to anything else or the override sheet. So free-for-all on everything we listened to last night. Is there any questions or points y'all have?
So I'm just unclear. We had a really rapid-fire run-through on special services, or I forget what they're called, but
Did
are we gonna, can we just kind of refresh that
Sure.
presentation? And
Yep, we can definitely do that. I do think that Eric made it through the 3 slides, but we did not ask any questions. So perhaps we should circle back to the end of those. I'm trying to scroll my own.
Thank you again. I know it was rapid fire last night. I appreciate it. No, it's all good. It's a little bit easier for me. So, don't want to have to reiterate everything if you don't need it. Certainly, any questions as we did last night in terms of our exercise that you'd like to specify on, and/or I'm happy to give another broad level highlight, but just out of respect to you all, just let me know how you prefer to kind of.
I think maybe just a description, right? So is it a fair recap to say that everything student services related was moved to the central office, including financials, reviews, you talk about efficiency and calibration, right? So the way you write those things or the extra pages in IEPs, all of that was kind of taken out of the individual schools and moved to the central office?
Good question. The vast majority of our personnel are under the student services umbrella. Most of those are special education positions. assessment counselors, school psychologists, all those service providers that don't necessarily fall just under the special education category, but certainly fall under student services, all remain in the school-based budgets. The biggest shifts that we found as we looked to really work, I worked with my colleagues, all the administrators, on kind of building up a needs-based budget, and for me, selfishly, in year one, it was really good for me, a really good exercise, a meaningful exercise for me to wrap my mind around what are we spending things on and how does that relate to those service provisions. I shared about a month or so ago, maybe at school committee, that special education, as a practice and as a department is a reactive one, because we have to react to the students' needs from a compliance standpoint first and foremost. But if we can be proactive in a reactive world, that's really the gold standard, and looking at what we can do structurally. So through that, really the highlights that we took in terms of movement for positions were really our 2 service provider positions. We have 1 physical therapist. She's a district employee in our district. As a couple of administrators last night mentioned, previously, her 1.0, her full-time position had been parsed out based on student need and what locations she serviced students on just percentages. It was just a little bit inefficient and hard to kind of follow as I was wrapping my mind around the budget and just trying to put together the pieces around, kind of what's going on, how much are we spending and whatnot. So we just took, it's simple, all net neutral in terms of budget, just consolidating that, right, to the central office, special education. I mentioned a very quick example last night about occupational therapy. We contract out with a private agency. Whenever we contract out, those hourly rates are much higher than what a traditional employee's rate, hourly rate or salary would be. So we right now with our occupational therapy average about 22 hours per week. She provides services to our students. With the exact same amount of allocated budget for FY26, in terms of a comparative salary, we were able to up that weekly service provision to 32 hours. So that's about 10 hours extra per week that we can look to be very proactive, again, in that reactive world around servicing all students. So we can really, provide those proactive interventions instead of just sitting back and waiting and saying, oh, well, then we're just going to have to wait till they struggle too much to go to special education. So it's those little but really meaningful examples where we were able to look at things from, a pretty cost-neutral standpoint, and also to maximize that efficiency. It's the weeds that really make the lives of our educators that much easier, and all of our support staff around just invoicing and purchase ordering. Instead of having to send things out to 4 different schools, we just centralize it. So that was really the name of the game in terms of those personnel. As Tom and others mentioned last night, our extended school year, our summer services, again, have been parsed out based on the actual location where those were held in the summer. We just took those monies, literally just took because our summer is in the same fiscal year. We were able to look at, with Tom's help, the actual of what we spent that last July, August, and FY25, run that against what the projected FY25 was, consolidate all of that, but then found about $50,000 savings from the actual to projected. So that was just a really helpful example, and another one that we were able to work through as we project out for FY26. And the most important thing, the final one is our assessments. That's kind of a nominal amount. It's not too much money, but one of the biggest consolidations within our budget, again, where our contracted services that we contract out on there, a lot of kind of one-off and minimal student need services, such as that part of hearing, teachers that are visually impaired, students who may be nonverbal that use augmentative or assistive technology to use as communications, whether that's iPads or whatnot, consulting to our teachers to support our students. When we look at the whole holistic budgeted number in each school and what those contracted services numbers were, the total was around $500,000 budgeted for FY25. The actual of what we project to need next year, I think, was about $275,000 or $300,000. So we were able to consolidate all of that centrally, but also have a huge budget savings in terms of what our projections were for next year. So I know there's been a lot of questions around, how do we have more FTE, but we decrease salaries, or decrease the budget and things like that. It was through all of that work to look at, kind of cleaning up, so to speak, really look at that needs-based approach on, what are those projected budget numbers needed in terms of our service provisions needs. So that's really that big efficiency model that we work to do. And and work it throughout FY '26.
Okay, questions on student services?
Yeah, so kudos to you for, putting together a strategic plan and rethinking the delivery of services. I hope it works out really well. Have you done this consolidation in this fiscal year, or is this something you're planning for next?
We try to do everything, as we can, as things come. Again, where the benefit, so to speak, of being reactive is that there's moving parts all the time in terms of the number of students on IEPs, the number of students who qualify, and services and things like that. So we got to kind of do both. So anytime we find opportunities to consolidate, to be more efficient, to see what we can do with our current staff and personnel in a more creative way, and a lot of times the good thing is that the more inclusive mindset we can take, in terms of looking at grouping students from small group instead of one-to-one, that's a time savings, but also potential cost savings and things like that. So I think more minimally for this, throughout this fiscal year, it was more projecting out based on students' IEPs and service needs, what is FY '26 going to look like in terms of needs, and then how do we put a dollar sign on that in terms of our current staff and then any contracted.
Okay, so this year, consolidation of contracts, for example, hasn't happened yet, but you're projecting to happen for next year. Got that? Okay. And so how many actual FTEs are in your budget?
Yeah, great question. I don't have my budget book in front of me, so I have some notes, but Tom, correct me if I'm wrong. The central office budget, let me just pull it really quick here.
For fiscal '26,
Yes.
it goes up from 2.5 to 7.5.
So 5 additional into central office. I will list them out. So the OT and PT, occupational therapy and physical therapy, that's an example. We're not planning to spend extra money. That's just taking the school-based positions, bringing them.
They weren't in your budget before, they were other people's budgets.
Correct.
Correct.
Exactly. Just parsed out by school. We also have an IDEA federal grant that we receive money for every year. Basically, as I walked into the budget process and the grant building process for this year, I realized that for several years in a row, we have funded a handful of staff positions in that grant budget. That's really not a best practice, very similarly to the overall expectation in terms of a paying grant or any type of thing. It's not really a long-term sustainable model. And so through that, actually, as we submitted our IDEA grant this year and it got approved, we heard from our grants manager a message that was kind of sort of like, hey, we'll approve it, but for next year, you got to make some changes. We can't just have the same staff in at all times, because IDEA is really, the intent of that money is to supplement our service provisions, not to supplant what our local and state budgets should be providing. So through all of that, I share all of that because there's a handful of positions that we have found opportunities, again, through efficiencies and just working creatively with the principals, to find them back into the school-based budget, even though that may be a fiscal net neutral cost. We may decrease a teacher need, but we've added that teacher to the school-based budget. So it's net neutral, but we've gotten that out of the IDEA grant. So one of those positions is a board certified behavior analyst, or BCBA, has been funded historically or for the past few years in our budget, in our grant that has moved to our central office special education budget. Another position, it's a new position that we weren't able to instill for this year, to get to your question and point around were we able to make efficiencies this year. Through some natural, kind of staff attrition, so to speak, we had, some staff within our department leave mid-year. We were able to look more creatively at carving out a new position, an early childhood coordinator position. That is a position that from the first week that I came on in July was really advocating for, just in terms of aligning both of our schools' early childhood programming, and early childhood is our pre-K and kindergarten. That's kind of how we've defined our early childhood. In terms of supporting state level mandates, making sure that we are in compliance. There's a federal mandate called Child Find that really ensures that we are proactive in if there's any students that we suspect may have a disability, we need to evaluate all those things. We've done a relatively fine job in Ipswich, but there's a few things that frankly did fall through the cracks. There's such an importance, and again, in my philosophy, again, in being proactive and making sure that we are being so collaborative and serving as a liaison and just another member of the team with our private preschools, with early intervention, things like that, that I think that we have such an opportunity to bring to the next level. So that position itself will fall into the central office budget. So that's 4, and I can't remember the last one off the top of my head, but it might have been just a combination of our service providers as well. So, but that's it in a nutshell.
Might it be the OT that's coming off contracted services?
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
Just with regard to number of students, I don't think, we didn't ask any of the principals last night about number of students, because, you know, that's kind of your world, is at least, that's the way we understood it. So would you be able to tell us how many students in each of the schools and how that ties to the percentage of expense? And then I guess, you know, town-wide, what percentage of students are considered special education students?
Yeah, great question. I'll start with that last one, and it might help to frame the answer. So we are at about 21% of our students, you know, pre-K to 12, including our students who are out of district, who have qualified and who are actively on an IEP. Just for comparison, the state average is about 18 or 19%. That's pretty consistent. So Ipswich is fixed a little bit higher than that. Excuse me, handful of reasons for that. You know, to be frank, and this is not a bad thing, it's not a criticism at all. I think there's sometimes a little bit of an if you build it, it will come mindset in terms of erring on the side of caution, so to speak, around students with disabilities and really making sure that a student would qualify if we're in a meeting where, you know, things could go either way, and it's really been Ipswich's approach to make sure we can be proactive and provide those higher levels of services early on, than to sit back and wait and say, well, they may not qualify, we're going to err on the side of no. And so, you know, I think philosophically, that certainly aligns with my pursuit and continuance of those service delivery models. So I don't have the breakdown I'm looking at by school, but I know that, do you have it?
We do. It's on, so it's the last slide in each of the school decks. So we want to just go back to the, if you have go back to the last slide, we'll see here is high school, so keep going. There you go. So it's on that slide, because we're required to provide this information at our end-of-year report. So I have sort of this information readily available, and that's, so you see here that the regular education, and we also break it out for salaries and non-salaries, pretty much salaries and everything else, services and materials. So salaries, this is the high school only. Salaries.
And how many students take advantage of those services, though?
At the high school? I honestly don't know. I'm going to hand that one back. I can be your money guy, but I'm not the...
Holistically, we're just under about 350 students, pre-K to 12. I can help you test pretty well. I have it on a different spreadsheet, but I don't have that right in front of me.
Well, the hunt was really 21%, because, you know, historically, we're around 17, 18, and, you know, our communities around us are in that spot. So that is a pretty large bump recently, and
yeah, no, it has risen. I have gone back. There's, similar. I know that the term DART data. I think John Mitchell mentioned last night, and special education. There's also another acronym called RADAR, the Special Education Radar data that DESE provides, and it's a pretty cool interactive tool that you can. It pulls district profile information around special education, but you can then look at comparable districts, and it's not just comparable regionally, but really just based on demographic and size and things like that. So, and it has I think at least a 5-year, going back aggregate. We've been a tick higher, than the state average. It has ebbed and flowed. COVID certainly, we've seen a jump statewide, nationwide, frankly, right around special education and things like that. So yeah, I think things have creeped up a little bit. We're not, I think, again, in my personal research, again, COVID was a huge result of that. I think that whole concept of learning loss and whatnot, and frankly, a lot of districts and communities with higher socioeconomic statuses that have a little bit either additional resources or parents who have that higher level of education comparatively to other districts, we may have seen a little bit of a higher, tick up in terms of that advocacy for students' needs and things like that. I think holistically, it's not really an area of concern, for me in terms of just, oh my gosh, like the numbers are going, they're just getting out of control or things like that. I actually really, from a process standpoint, I've been I'm very grateful and very impressed with what that's looked like from an eligibility standpoint.
Eric, it's
not overly identified.
We have 90 and it's 18.3%.
At high school?
86 middle school.
Great, so 90, thank you, crowd. 90 students at the high school,
86,
86 at the middle school,
including out of district.
including out of district.
So it's 18%.
18% at the high school, and probably, it might be around that at middle
Do the
school.
numbers.
Typically, elementary is a little bit higher, if that makes sense. And again, I would say that if we were the opposite, I would be a little bit concerned. I think, again, if our approach is to be proactive and identify students early and often, that means that we're doing things right from the federal mandate coming down, in terms of identifying students with disabilities, intervening, and then trying to wean that IEP off, which is always a celebration, when we're able to do that, so.
Thank you. Your last slide of your presentation, would you mind kind of walking us through what that means and then connect that to students if you could?
This one here?
Yes.
Our out-of-district numbers. Yeah, so as part of kind of that strategic planning process, and certainly from a fiscal standpoint, I've always found it's really important to take a look at where are we going in terms of our out-of-district costs. Just as any student, that would be at Ipswich High School, our kiddos who are out of district, the vast majority of them will receive a diploma from that school, and once they've reached all of their credits, we also have a number of students, even in district, but also out of district, that will remain until age 22, which is that maximum age, for age out. And so, as we have looked at projections for the total tuition cost for this was FY 25, and then you work down all the way to FY 30, we see a significant savings and bump. And FY 27 has been the number, or the year, excuse me, for next fiscal year that I really kept an eye on, is that there is a high number of students who will be either aging out or graduating. Out of respect to confidentiality for our students, I'm not going to get into the weeds around like total number of students or any identifiable information, but what I will say is these numbers, these savings in year to year, is less about the number of students aging out or graduating. It's more about the placement. Our residential private schools, are going to cost upwards of $250,000 to $300,000 annually, sometimes even more. And our private day schools range from 50 to 100-ish tuition, in terms of annual costs. Tack that on for our day schools, transportation costs and things like that. So this is really important because it dovetails into, as you heard last night, really one of our, it's really our priority and primary investment, so to speak, next year is building out our therapeutic social emotional supports for our students. The highest number of students currently out of district qualify for an emotional disability, attend schools that are therapeutic in nature. As I've learned more and more about certain profiles of students and then students who have historically gone out of district, it matched up to, in other districts, in my experience, those profiles that I do believe, I feel very confident that we as a public school and as a community can support in district. And that's best for students in terms of inclusion and ensuring that they can stay within their hometown and community, but also from a fiscal standpoint, puts us in a much better place. So these numbers, this green, would be the annual savings, and then this would be, if we were to hold all constant, meaning that, no, year after year, no other students go out of district. I understand that that is frankly likely not a reality because it's so unpredictable, but this is just a snapshot in time of saying 5 years out from now, this is really going to support our decisions and planning for future practice, future building up of specialized programs and things like that in district versus saying that a child has reached a certain level of threshold and then they have to automatically go out of district.
So apologize for this question.
No worries.
I'm not familiar with the vocabulary here, so
Sure.
One's out of state, one's public, one's collaborative, one's private.
Yep, great question. Out of state is out of state. We just have, for a variety of reasons, sometimes if students are involved in DCF or they might be boards of the state or things like that, they may get placed out of state. Sometimes because just of what state laws are, we may remain fiscally responsible even though we're not programmatically responsible. So those cases just pop up. So there are just out of state private schools that we would remain fiscally responsible for, and that would be that reflection of that one tuition. I'll just jump down to our collaboratives, North Shore Collaborative, Crest Collaborative, those are our collaboratives. We are members of those collaboratives. They have, schools that support students with therapeutic needs, with students with autism, specific learning disabilities, things like that. But they're considered public schools, but they work as our collaborative and more collaboratively in terms of what those extended evaluations look like for placement and things like that. Public schools are truly other districts. So we have a handful of students that attend some specialized program, are enrolled in some specialized programs in other school districts in communities. Again, that's our hope and goal and part of our vision to build that. Our ultimate goal is to build up those programs to a point where we can start promoting and marketing what our programming is as a tuition and revenue source as well. We've begun that already this year. And then our private day schools or residential schools are Chapter 76, they're DESE approved special education schools that are truly that higher level of care, much more restrictive, but certainly just necessary from whether that's a cognitive or physical or mental disability.
And then, so the last thing is, Gina was saying, it was nice to see your strategy. Your strategy really is to gain benefit of the public and maybe some of the private. Is that how you see it, or?
You got it. Yeah, absolutely. And collaborative, frankly. It's really, I think the private captures our day schools, but also some residential. Residentials, we don't have a high number of students who are residentially placed. That truly is that, a lot of times 24-hour care. That really is another level of need that wouldn't be expected for us as a public school and as a public school district to look to replicate for a variety of reasons and certainly from a cost reason as well. But really any of our day placements is always important, and it's something that the principals know, our special education team chairs know. I've asked a lot of questions this year around what can we do? What can we explore to be more inclusive, to continue to promote that philosophy in our community, but also to remain fiscally responsible as well.
Perfect, thank you.
Other questions about student services?
Your data, is this from a group of schools, or is it something that you have put together yourself?
This is all based on our current students who are out of district, that then we project out when, based on years, those current students would, plan to age out or graduate. So those numbers are just these are based on the actual tuitions of the current schools that those students attend. That makes sense.
So do you use anything like population data, financial data, or so forth when you work on this?
No, it's really just, we have about 29 students this year out of district. And so the number, again, is projected to decrease. All we've taken is what the Department of Education and other agencies within the state, they set as what those state rates are for those private schools. And then we just take that information. On average, we bump up between 3% and 4%. We project out every year because that is really what those averages have been. A year or two ago, due to COVID and other things, there was a population of our group of schools that jumped up about 14%, which was very unexpected, and we didn't get much, if any, heads up on that, which was really difficult. But we don't anticipate any of that. So these projections out are just based on per category what those costs will be between now and FY30. So it's really just kind of a basic calculation based on the actual conditions that we have.
Thank you.
Well,
One last question. With regard to busing,
Yeah.
what level of expense would you expect to see in the different categories there? I guess collaborative and private would be the majority.
Yeah, I mean, it's really in public, and the private, again, our residential is naturally, we're not transporting, students. I think, it's really hard to give you like the breakdown because it is variable and iterative constantly. There are just different, routes, we are at the hands and the discretion of the transportation companies. One of our administrative assistants at central office, if she were here, would tell you that loud and clear. She's our transportation coordinator. It is very complex. We spent, I believe, just for FY '25, I think we're at about $750,000 in budget for this year.
25, we budgeted 800? 800,000 in 25 and 825 in 26?
Yeah. So that's huge, right? And we're getting up towards, $1 million or so, we're creeping out there just for transportation costs. That is, we are continuously looking at what can we do and working with our vendors on different bids and things like that, trying to build those relationships to bring those daily costs down. But naturally, there's that correlation, the lower the number of students who are out of district, those transportation costs are also going to decrease as well. So we budgeted for FY '26 an increase, I think between 7 or 8%, right? We might have started around 10%, which seems high, but that has been also the going rate, especially after COVID. And a little bit of almost a monopoly, so to speak, in terms of what those costs have been.
Last call for student services. Go ahead, David.
You mentioned that these projections are based on current students that are in the program. But that, there could be situations in the future where more new students are added to the program that we don't know about today. Are there any initiatives underway to handle more of that in district without having to go out of district?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for asking. This has been a huge point of work this year, and again, I think we heard a lot last night around targeting our therapeutic supports, really with the support of Dr. Blake and then in collaboration with our principals. Already this year, we made some investments and some structural changes in looking at what those therapeutic supports and structures can be. At one point earlier this school year, I walked into Dr. Blake's office and I said, hey, we got about 4 to 6 students we got to maybe start looking at out-of-district placements. Or we can start looking at what we can do to invest within our community. None of those students are out of district now, so that's a huge savings. We are super excited about the work already that our teams have begun to do proactively. There's a lot of excitement around what we can do to build those structures. So it's on both ends of the spectrum. It's both keeping our current students in district, and then to the points and a couple of questions that were asked, there's a small handful of students that we're targeting and really working hard with families on right now to try to bring them back in district next year. So we haven't budgeted for that decrease in out-of-district costs, but that would certainly be a bonus from a fiscal standpoint as well.
Do we have any kind of dialogue with other surrounding districts to learn best practices that they may be doing and maybe we can leverage? Or?
We do, yeah. And just with this example, this is my experience personally as well. I started my career as a therapeutic teacher in itself, but there's, from private consultancies to certainly, yes, our regional special education directors group and listservs are always flying in terms of best practices and being collaborative. Dr. Blake and I met with superintendents and special directors earlier this year around really, the concerns here around, just from a cost standpoint and what we can do to work collaboratively. So, yeah, it's ongoing, it's proactive, it's constant. We're doing the best. That's what we can do. And I am really excited about the investments that way.
Yeah, thank you for all the great work you're doing.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks a lot.
Can I just make one point, Emily? Thanks. So just to tie a bow on it, because this ties a little bit back to FTEs. So this is a situation where it sounds like you found 2 sort of net neutral FTEs to assist with this, and then the hiring of a new FTE. So I think we all sort of are wary of FTEs, but this is a case where if we can keep, 4, 5, 6, 8 kids in district, and with the average cost of a student going out of district of about $100,000 or more between tuition and transportation, that FTE is a super cost-effective thing to do if we're keeping kids in district. So I just want to make sure that's,
We also appreciate that, and so thank you. driving that home, I appreciate it. Okay, last call for student services. Thank you, Eric.
All right, thank you all.
I'd like us to have an opportunity to cover anything that we discussed in the 110 pages over the last 2 nights. And so we'll have time for that now, and then we will move on to the override topic, calculator, budget, et cetera. But any questions we did not get to last night, or topics you want to return to?
So I just, I kind of feel like I don't have a firm understanding that the school department and town are in sync on capital spending. I hope that they are, but we just got an updated capital plan today, I guess. So I think your the townwide capital plan is carrying about $1.5 million in expenditures in FY '26.
So I think, if I'm not mistaken, we're going to be going to the capital plan later this evening specifically as an
great.
agenda item. So I'd like, if I can, try to keep this to the presentations from last night with my administrators, because I want to get them out of here.
Really? You want to
Really?
send them home?
Yeah, well,
So much fun being here, come on.
You have to get up early.
So, 110 pages. What questions do we have on that? We'll go to capital and override calculator, apologies. Anything? Go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, so there was a comment made about the fact that the electric buses that are currently planned, may not materialize based on what happens with grants, and that the diesel buses are half the cost. And I'm just wondering, does that have any impact on the budget if that were to come to pass?
It would not have an impact on the fiscal '26 budget because the electrification grant wouldn't take effect. If it does come to be, it would be an FY '27 impact. So it would be no impact in the foreseeable future. Of course, there's a lot of questions about what the EPA, funding may be, because it's an EPA grant. So that may or may not materialize at all, right?
Administrator-specific questions. Go ahead, Jimmy.
So, Jonathan, we had a discussion last night, and I think you were going to try to put together that, did you call it a DART analysis? Just want to.
Yeah, I still need to speak up.
I think that one is live now.
Okay. Yes, I believe, Tom, did you send the DART link out to the FinCom?
I did not, no.
Okay.
No problem, if you could.
I looked at it, and I was disappointed that I couldn't go back to 23 and to 22 before that, because, as you all know, one data point is not a trend to make, which probably gives you an idea that I'm about to say that our numbers were not good for last year, and they weren't. Typically, when we look at our like districts, Ipswich is in at grade 10, the top 1, 2, or 3 positions out of like 8 or 9 different districts. And this past year for 24, we are second from the bottom out of those 8 same districts. A couple of changes, like Hamilton-Wenham is now out of our comparison. Newburyport, for some reason, got added into our group. I don't think Newburyport's a similar district to us, but I don't get to make those decisions. So I sent that out again to the department heads who are relevant, the science, math, and English department heads, and reiterated for them, like, hey, we need to make sure we're taking a look at the data, they're on top of things, and I trust that this year we'll have better numbers. I'm hoping that next year when I make a report, we'll be back up in the top 2 or 3 of that, the DART comparison. It's interesting though, if you go to just Google DART, DESI DART, it even has like finance and accountability, assessment, all kinds of different comparisons I think you'd be interested in seeing.
But you're saying the numbers, can't get the numbers for prior years?
I can't. I don't know if it's because the districts change every year and they don't like kind of take a snapshot of each year's comparisons, or I don't know why. Usually there's a little button, a little left arrow that you can click on to go back to previous years, and that button doesn't exist in that web page.
But if you could send us the link.
Sure, I'll do that.
Last call for administrators. Before we let them go, I just want to thank you all for putting up with us for a night and a half. I know we can be a tough bunch. but we are here to do a very specific job, so we appreciate your flexibility and patience. And that is all we have for the administrators.
Thank you.
Keith, I'm going to ask you to stay because I think there's going to be capital questions on technology.
Thanks, everybody.
Capital?
Just didn't hurt. I don't know, maybe this is what I did. Oh, yeah.
Everyone got the sheet from Catherine that is updated as of tonight?
Do you want a paper copy?
No.
Easy peasy.
Tom, can you have a copy of that?
Of course.
It's not for me. It's not for me, it's for
Yeah,
Keith.
there's a couple of them in there. There's, I think, 4 or 5 copies there.
I don't want it. I want this. No, I have.
Now it's a big deal.
So shall we wait for Dr. Blake to return?
Oh, no, we don't have to. He said we can.
Feasibility study money next over, like, what fiscal years are we thinking, just as we see this
Oh.
go on next week?
Feasibility should be fall town meeting.
Oh,
Should be fall town meeting of 25.
Fall 2025.
Okay, so everyone has these pages for the most part. Pages 4 and 5 address the schools specifically. I see a lot of movement from 26 to 28, and I see a lot of things that may or may not be intended to cover by NORESCO. I see a lot of things funded from free cash. I don't know, Tom, do you want to take us through this? Do you want,
I can.
okay,
Or
great.
certainly can begin to, yeah.
Sure.
So on page 4, and we can slide between the original document, which is obviously a much larger document that has all of the backup material in it, the worksheets and all of that, and the document that is dated March 7, which is pretty much the budget sheet, right? So on page 4, starting with the Doyon, these were the items that Some of them are recurring, meaning that they are events, they are projects that we ask for, fairly typically. And then there are those facility needs, capital needs that are really necessary for the operation, the physical plant operation of the building. One of my comments last night in talking about the appropriated budget work was that some of the things that we see in the appropriated budget and see here are still going to be needed to keep the operation of the two elementary schools going. The students that are going to be joining us in September are going to spend their entire elementary school career in either of those two. That's even if the stars align, and we do have a new elementary schools, that's, 7, 8+ years away, right? So for good or bad, depending on one's perspective, I suppose, history being what it is, we need to keep these buildings functioning with, basic utilities, heat, power, security, and so forth. So these are the types of needs that have been determined. Some of the determinations go back to a 2019 school facilities report that was done by an outside consultant that has been the basis of some of the planning. Of course, COVID put a pin in lots of those things, and some of that work didn't get done, and other things, did get done.
Was that known as School Dudes?
That's the school dude report,
you.
yes. Yep, that's it, that's the one. So some of these things were referenced in that report. And that report now is 6 years old. So the report was recommending that some of these things be done within a 2 or 3 year period, and that was 2 or 3 years ago. So just so, working through there, I suppose we probably would you want us to talk about each of them or the ones that are recommended for 26?
26 is what matters.
26, yeah.
Yeah, I would say let's focus on 26, and then just curious about at what point in the discussion things moved from 26 to a future date, because we do have a lot of arrows in here.
So the first thing that is in the 20, is in 26 for Adoyan is a 3-ton replacement. It's a 3-ton, it's a rooftop unit, yep, above, effectively serving the school space in and around the library area, the entranceway in the library area. And we're having some airflow troubles there, to put it mildly. And the advocacy, that is an immediate need, so that's a request for next year. Next down for next year is some,
Quick question, how old is the unit that's up there right now, and what's the timing of doing it?
I think it's 10 years old or more.
The timing, it would be the summer.
Yeah, if these things are approved.
Is your facilities person here too?
He's not here tonight. Something like that, once approved at town meeting, we would move forward with ordering it in the hopes of getting delivery over the summer to be able to install it on the roof while school's not in session.
Good idea.
Who did the evaluation on that, to come up with the fact that they needed it and what they would replace it with? Was that our guy or the school dude's
It was in this, I believe it was in the school dude report, and we've had significant issues to the point where I believe it has been non-functional at times.
Did anybody investigate alternative technologies that may be more cost-effective to implement and/or run?
Yeah. So to help with this, in preparing this recommendation, we've reached out to our HVAC, contractors, because they're the ones that the last couple of years have tried to help keep this, Band-Aided together. And their recommendation is that it's really not worth putting any more money into trying to repair it. It's just not functioning at all. So it's their recommendation and their recommendation that the new unit is necessary, And they recommended, or they produced the quote that got us to the $34,000 request.
This is for the library, basically. That room.
Basically, the library. The library and the front space, but the library is the largest consumer of that front space.
You can't see why they didn't consider a couple mini splits, because it would cost less and probably do better. But I guess we are where we are.
Maybe it's the style of those windows. I think they're like glass panes in the front, and then there's nothing else that's vented out. I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know. It's a guess. Yes, some experience plumbing. No, sorry. Keep going.
Okay.
We've
Next
got-
down is the principal's office and classroom conversion. That has been on the need for a couple of years now, as we find ourselves needing more classroom space, and actually smaller classroom space for a small group work and for therapeutic work even. The Doyon has a fairly large principal's office. It's a former classroom. And we just feel that we can convert that space into better use. Certainly, cobbling up some space for the principal to function in the work that he needs to do, but certainly not necessarily in the large space that his office is consuming now. And of course, the footprint is only so big, so we're trying to make best use of that. This would be similar to work that was done last summer in the fiscal '25 capital plan at the Winthrop School.
And this would create an extra classroom or a,
We create an extra classroom and some small group spaces.
okay.
Next down is the kitchen replacements. You'll see that in each of the schools. I could make a broad sweeping statement just regard to that, but certainly speak to what some of the items that are needed. We haven't had the capacity in the last couple of years, or perhaps we haven't taken the capacity in the last couple of years to really to replace some of the kitchen equipment that is really beyond its useful life, and some of it also, not functioning. We have put some of the type of needs for equipment themselves on the project detail sheets, and the type of things that our food service, our director and the food service teams would like to be able to do. There's a lot of things in the provision of a breakfast and lunch that there are standards, there are food standards that we need to meet that would be better able to do so with newer and more modern equipment, also equipment that is more efficient. One point to make in each of the cases, certainly for the two elementary schools, is that anything that we're putting is not a permanent add. It's going to need to be plugged into water or power or gas, but certainly there are things that are going to be mobile enough to be able to be repurposed elsewhere.
Just a point of clarification, does the FinCom all have the entire capital plan with the backup sheets?
I don't
Just got it
think,
by email, right? Was
I
it-
don't think we have all the backup sheets. I think we just have water, wastewater backup sheets, if I look at my binder.
We don't have a current one.
Right.
This is the new
Yeah,
one.
we're missing some data.
You received all the backup sheets, the detail sheets?
Electronically?
was electronically.
Okay.
Okay, because I don't want to insult anyone's intelligence by reading off the sheets that you already have.
No, but I think if you can quickly summarize what the proposal is, that would be great. I think, originally, first draft of the capital plan was missing a lot of the school stuff. I think we got an updated one that you sent us, Catherine, that had more of the school stuff in it. So,
I did bring 5 copies just to have them. I'm happy to, if you wanted to share, happy to provide them.
No, he needs the longer
I'm
ones.
sure.
Hard copies of the backup.
He needs
Did we, I don't know if they have
the full one
these.
that have all the.
But in the larger document that came out at end of February, February 24th or thereabouts, this is materials, all the backup sheets were included, including the schools. And I think that's the one that's on the town website. Isn't that the one on the town website, Catherine?
Yes.
Yes. So it's on the town website homepage.
So you'll, and just in keeping with the Paul F. Doyle Memorial School, you'll see a number of things that have to do with the grounds around the school. So for example, and some of them have been moved out. I know, Emily, you had alluded to that earlier. So we understand that there's a fuel storage tank that should be replaced that was in the school dude report. We haven't had it looked at, but we anticipate that, it was apparently nearing end of life. We pushed that out. We pushed out the redoing the entire parking lot for a couple of years.
Didn't the town just come in and redo the parking lot a few years ago?
I'm sorry?
Didn't the town come in and? No.
Not for Doyon,
They
but they did it for
did
Winthrop.
Winthrop.
I mean,
We had
Doyon was
Winthrop-
done not that long ago. But a whole, the outer parking lot right by the road.
I don't know that. I don't recall that happening. But anyway, we pushed some of those things out, not knowing what was going to be happening with a building project. Didn't make sense to me right away to be putting in new parking lot, redoing the entire parking lot if we were going to be digging it up or doing something different. So we pushed those types of things out. We also pushed out the fire alarm system, we pushed out from 27 to 28 to upgrade that. But we are looking to, at least next year, in FY '26, to seal and stripe the parking lot as it is, because it's tough to see where the parking lines and the no parking zone markings are.
Do teachers need to park, or do people that park there need to park on the grass?
Typically, that's a great question. Typically, no, but for events, they certainly do. Not unlike here, where we have a big event and it's bedlam with parking.
Or Mile Lane overflow often is used, or even out on Linebrook Road. So trying to avoid ruining the grass, which is used for a lot of sport events and other events that we put on. There was some damage to it from an event last year. So there is not an abundance of parking, but we do try to avoid parking on the grass. So the stripes will be very helpful.
And for those of you that need it electronically, Catherine did send it to us on 2/24, if you want to pull it up that way. So questions on Doyon? No, okay. Winthrop? So modular classroom seems like the biggest ticket item. Those have to happen this year?
We're at we have no more space there. We're doing work, we're doing small group instruction in the hallways at this point. So we're putting it in to essentially provide preschool learning space and some small office space so that we can gain space for the Winthrop School. Because even, as Tom pointed out, we've got to consider the next 5, 7 years. So it's not getting any better, and the building's not getting any bigger.
So didn't preschool move from Winthrop to Doyon, and now are we splitting it between the two, or just refresh my memory on?
Yeah, but it's in both.
Oh,
Yeah, both places.
both sides,
Yep.
okay, got
Yep.
it, sorry.
So just on that point, so right now, the music department at Winthrop's in the in a module two, which I'm forgetting if we rent that or we own that now. Is this owning another one that's next, leasing? Is this a lease of one?
Yes.
The cost, the $240,000 that we're requesting is for the first year lease and effectively the installation, the delivery, installation, and getting it up and running. It's about a $64,000, annual cost, which we would need to build into fiscal '27 planning, or either the appropriated budget or perhaps a continued, capital request. But this is based on a 5-year lease, and this 240 gets the building brought, delivered, and up and running.
And what happens at the end of 5 years?
Well, certainly by that time, we're going to know what the new elementary school, what the scenery will look like here in town. So either the lease will end and the product will go back to the company, or we may be, right, we may be in a different spot.
Been there
but-
before.
Yep.
And where's it going to be placed on the property?
So that's still being under consideration. There are 2 locations that are being looked at. We walked the grounds just last week with the building inspector. Obviously, the town officials have a commentary there. One of the options is behind the existing, the White House, the structure that you're referring to, Rob. It's either, one option is behind there, and the other option is immediately adjacent for what's known as door number 3, which is effectively between, if you're looking at the building straight on, it's on the left-hand side, between the walkway and the fence, which is effectively the property line.
Are you required to have bathrooms?
We're required to have 1 bathroom. The spec that you see in front of you, or as part of the project detail sheet, shows 2 bathrooms. The $240,000 is to get us about an 1,800 square foot building, which would be for 2 classrooms and either 2 bathrooms at that, or 1 bathroom in an office or a workspace. But we are required, because it will be a detached structure from the building, will be required to have both running water and a bathroom.
Obviously expensive space, you have to put a bathroom where
Yes.
one doesn't exist, yeah.
Are there other questions, or you want us to walk through each item?
Is-
I think walk through it. So the elevator is being pushed out. Why is that? And is there a safety issue around that?
Why is it in there at all?
No, why is it moved out 1 year?
Because we've had repairs done to it, and we feel that we can get by another year with it. It's past the inspections, et cetera.
The suspended ceiling being pushed out 2 years?
So we were looking to replace the suspended ceilings in the classrooms, and we just, it's been in the plan to do that, the ceiling tiles, and we pushed it off, again, not knowing where we were going to be with the potential new building.
And the roof is not leaking now, right?
No, nope,
And the tiles that are up there, are they stained?
yeah. In many areas they are.
And can that be done piecemeal so that everyone thinks they're in a clean building? Meaning they're just little squares, right?
Well, they're these size.
Okay.
Kitchen replacement?
Questions, more questions on Winthrop? Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. The last one, the condensation tank for Winthrop. And Tom, I'm sure you gave us a
Did, yeah.
hard copy
In
of
fact,
that. But
and there's a lovely picture as well. So that is not something that really can be pushed out
It's something.
because of the poor functionality of it. Our vendor is telling us we're just throwing, good money after bad in trying to keep that working,
Looks rusty.
got it.
among other things, yes. But that's an essential component to keeping, heat and airflow functioning in the building. Yeah.
So, are you done with, yeah, so the high school, so I understand the painting cycle, but the roof replacement, we are talking about, I feel like we've been talking about for a few months now, but do we feel like we can get another 4 years out of this roof? We're taking, we're rolling the dice?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, it's certainly been part of the recommendation for some time. This building is now 25 years old. It's still the flagship building of the school district, but it's certainly showing its age and showing its wear and tear. It's not a new building, and everything in this building is original equipment, right? So,
And there's no there's no possible way to do that project in phases? It's got to be all done at once?
I honestly don't know the answer to that.
Okay. Who
Probably.
would know the answer to that now that the facilities model has changed?
I would have to go back and see where that $5.6 million number came for FY '29. My guess is it was the previous facilities director. And I don't know whether it was talked about. If we're looking at $5.6 million to do the whole roof, what would it be? $1 million, $1.2 million a year for each section, and then, or an upcharge because you're not doing it all at once and having the crew on site for X number of days. I don't know that.
That's
And that may not be practical either.
not a good way at all.
What, the phases?
No.
Okay, well, 5.6 is a lot of money. Okay. Anyone have questions on the radio box? Sprinkler system?
You have a question on the sprinkler system.
Yeah.
You said full retrofit install. That's replacing all the heads and the controls, I'm
Yes.
assuming?
Yes.
The pipes are going to stay.
Yes.
Was any talk of running the system dry so it's not charged, so that, I know over the years, the schools suffered with frozen pipes because those pipes are in unheated spaces. I know you've done a lot of work to try to mitigate that. I'm not sure if it's all done. I haven't heard about frozen pipes in a couple of years. But may not even be the code that you can put a dry system in a school. It's got to be always charged. I'm not sure.
I think it is a dry system that.
We have,
that-
yeah.
We've had issues with it, and the heads are popping because there was air getting into the system as a result. Or air leaking out of the system, I should say.
Okay.
So when the pressure drops, then it charges the system.
Well, unless you water in it, when the pipes were getting frozen, there must have been water in it somewhere. But, okay.
Fire alarm upgrades, questions? Sure.
Rob, this is a random question. Is there alignment between the strategic working group's work products and the capital plan? So for example, that 5.6, is that a number we would expect to see in your working product, or?
That is,
Okay.
I think we're carrying a different number than that, like 6.
So do you see broadly alignment between the products?
Yeah, and remember, our strategic plan doesn't have any investments that are under $500,000.
I mean, there's a 6 million and a 5 million on this building, so.
Yeah.
Those would be two.
Fire alarm system backflow preventer replacements. I can't tell you, I know what that is.
So there are a number of backflow preventers in the building, and this is a project that has been on the last 2 years of the capital plan. There was funding in fiscal '25 for a backflow preventer, so we replaced those already. I believe there are 4 backflow preventers that service this building, and this would be to replace the next one in the row, in the series, rather.
Concerns, questions? Water, heat,
Got a question. Going back to your radio box communicator. So what we learned on the finance committee is our fire department is buying new radios, and our, I think I said fire, right? Fire and police, and they're using 2 different bands. Does your radio control communicator work with both of those bands? Do you know?
The one that we presently have does not. But the one that we're seeking to is also in conjunction with a collaboration from public safety. They're in the conversation about the purchase of this device.
So finance committee, do you recall how that plays? Like, can the police and the fire talk to each other, or do they need to go through central control?
Not, like, at the patrol level, I think at the command level they can, and I think they can through, maybe through dispatch, but in general, no, they're on a different band than the police and fire on different.
Fire can talk. Everybody can go through dispatch, but the fire can talk. They have dual bands.
Yeah,
So
dual
the chief
bands,
always-
okay, right.
Are any of our other buildings, school buildings, on that system, the new system, or would this be the first one?
This would be the first one, but the driving force or a significant element for the radio control box is also for internal communication ourselves. That's one of the real deficits of this building, in being able to have the handheld walkie-talkies, if you will, that really don't communicate well from one end of this building to the other, because this doesn't exist now as a device in the building for this purpose.
85-gallon water heater replacement, that can't be anything main, right? Is that for like a gym? $1,000?
It's not for a gym. I believe it's a unit that's servicing the kitchens. It's at that end of the building, not the kitchens plural, but the kitchens singular.
Yeah, it doesn't say, I don't think it's where it's servicing, so. Okay. Kitchen equipment.
There's a variety of pieces of kitchen equipment that are being requested. Again, just some of much of the kitchen equipment that we have just is not functioning, and it's well beyond its useful life, and it's in terms of some of the food prep items, the gas stove and some of the ovens in particular are really limiting the convection oven, are really limiting the capacity to cook diverse sorts of meals. And that's something that our cooking team has requested. We actually have a new chef here in the kitchen at the middle high school this year, new employee through a retirement, and he's pretty excited about the prospect of getting some new equipment to be able to diversify menus and diversify meal planning and that. So.
Bleacher replacement, are those a safety issue?
Yes.
Okay. End-of-life situation?
And increasingly so.
Okay. And that's full, kind of got what's there, new model, okay.
And the thinking is, as we replace those, the Roundy Gym floor refinishing needs to, every so many years, we have to, we redo the floor every so many years in terms of just re-waxing it. We will strip it down, but not to the bare wood. This project would be stripping it right down to the bare wood, putting new graphics on the wood, redoing the floor, and then putting the new bleachers in.
Questions on the bleachers or anything? Turf field?
So,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Dr. Blake?
Yeah.
You have floor refinishing for 20,000, and then the bleacher replacement for, let's call it 150,000. So in that 150,000 is doing the floors again, is that?
No, two separate things. I'm just saying we're going to do them at the same time.
And what's wrong with the bleachers?
We're not able to get parts. We have issues moving them back and forth, and in some areas, they've become a safety issue for us.
There's no backup on that, right?
There is.
Backup for the, yeah, it's in there.
There's a
Yeah.
project detail sheet for all of the projects.
So I think with Catherine, maybe am I looking at the wrong one, Catherine?
Yeah, the third one.
It was in the February 24th document.
Third version?
Yeah,
Okay, I must be looking at the second, sorry.
I think it's Rev 3.
What is the,
February 24th?
February 24th is when I saw the attachment with all the lists. I'm not sure if it includes the bleachers specifically.
It does.
Okay.
Not 224, no, at least the version I'm looking at.
224 is when the PDF was sent to everybody, Finance Committee and Select Board and School.
You have what?
It was sent to all, the Finance Committee, Select Board, and the school personnel.
I can't hear what she's saying.
This is the one right here.
What is the expected life of the new bleachers?
Yeah, but.
These bleachers lasted 25 years.
Oh, .3?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
Are you looking for this?
Yeah.
Hold on, I lost my place. Where am I? All right, turf lights, locker replacement. Any questions on those for middle school, high school? Looks like lockers are part of a phased plan.
Over 3 years, yes. We replace a bank of lockers each of the next 3 years.
We've got, I'm just gonna run through these. If y'all have any other follow-up questions, I'll ask at the end. Nothing at the Payne School. And then district-wide, there's that technology number that I think you were staying around for. Otherwise, there's flooring and carpet for 20 grand, roof repairs for 35K, and 15,000 for painting. So, technology, user equipment. Can we get a little highlight on that?
Sorry if I seem disproportionately enthusiastic. I don't get to talk at these very often. So most of you folks are connected to this access point right here. And what we're looking for is funding for what this is connected to. In the back of the pack, in a dark closet no one really ever goes into, we have a bunch of switches in there. And we have maybe 10 or 15 closets like that across the district. So if you folks have a Verizon router or a Comcast router at your house, what the task that all of these closets perform is like that, but on steroids. And so when you put them all together, that's how everything in our district talks to anything else. It's the term for it is a backbone. And so what we'd like to do is replace the backbone of the district. Why would you want to do it all at once? Well, if you have machines of varying levels of sophistication, they tend to operate at the lowest level. So if you replace it over a period of time, they'll always work at the level of the dumbest one.
Wasn't even looking at that.
So it's better for us if we replace them all at the same time. And we actually did exactly this back in 2019. The mistake I made in 2019, the rookie mistake is what Joanne called it, is that when we came in, there was a set amount for the capital request, and it was already set at 150 when I came here. And replacing all of these cost more than that. And so Joanne said, and if you've ever had Joanne Cuff go to work on you, she makes you feel like a 7-year-old. And she said, make sure that you get this in the capital request next time. So back in 2019, we were actually planning to do this year's down the road. We were planning on doing it last year, but we were able to stretch the life of the switches one additional year. And because of COVID, we were able to stretch the life of the part I'm going to talk about next. So the cost of replacing all of these is about $300,000. Our estimate's coming in around $325,000. However, because of E-rate funding, we're able to get, due to our free and reduced launch numbers, 50 cents on the dollar. So we get the equipment for half of the cost. Our E-rate funding is up this year. If we don't take advantage of that 50 cents on the dollar now, I may be in front of you 2 years from now with no guarantee of 50 cents on the dollar, with no guarantee of E-rate. So my strong recommendation is that we do this now. And then the expectation of the life of the switches would be another 6 or 7 years. Maybe in 31 or 32, we're having a similar conversation. So that's kind of where all of that is coming from. And the number you see, 292, about half of that is allocated to the switches because of the 50 cents on the dollar. And so I'm estimating that at around 150, it might come in at 155. The rest of that money is what I would normally ask you for in any given year, which is dedicated to teacher laptops, projector replacements, and Chromebooks. And so that's where all of those numbers come from.
It says the switch replacement is approximately every 60 months. What type of cost, is that the switch only, or is that this type of turnover every 60 months?
It's this type of turnover every 60 months, and it's more like 30 switches, but they all need to talk to each other. And again, if you can keep them at the same level of sophistication, so you buy them at the same time, then they all operate a little more efficiently. If we replace them a little at a time, then they operate at the lowest level.
Is there any like data center or contracted benefit that's out there aside from us like owning, operating, and turning over? Is there anything out there that we could explore where there's like a maintenance contract?
Sure, there are some of those, but the E-rate funding that we're looking for right now is specifically Category 2.
Okay.
Which is sort of the stuff that you have on-prem. There are some services you can grab too. And we also, especially now, I'm more comfortable with the control here in our hands than where it may be outside.
Other questions on, sorry, what are the phones? Switch replacement for $292,000.
Yeah, who's going to do the work and how fast can the work get done and what kind of time frame, like school year wise?
So the last time what we did is, it's a little challenging to put the work inside the E-rate request because you don't know like how much the bid is going to come in for. And so they also want to come in and take a look at everything, and then I'm not comfortable with a million different companies coming in and looking at our systems. So we don't include the work in the E-rate request. But the last time the work came in at about $18,000, and I'm guessing now it'll be around 2025. And then we were able to do it over Christmas break. The equipment got delivered to the vendors, they stage all the equipment, and then they kind of bring it in here and it's plug and play.
And that 18,000 or 20,000, that's not in this number, or is it?
That is not in this number. I didn't put in the E-rate there. If the number comes back low enough, then we might be able to include it with the capital request. Otherwise, the rest of the funds are allocated towards like classroom stuff.
Thank you.
Sure.
Other questions on technology, user equipment? Other questions on the school capital? Go ahead, Dana.
So I didn't see any references to anything being asked for related to security. Do you have everything you need from a security standpoint that's capital related?
In terms of things that are urgent, we are, I would say that we're set for right now. We continue to chip away at things like cameras and such, but not capital expenditures.
Thank you.
Last call, questions, yeah?
I have a question about something that's not on the list. This room. Are you looking into making this room more suitable for public meetings by including a speaker system connected to the mic so that people who sit in the audience can hear what the school committee and others are saying?
We have not put that in the capital plan.
I think you should. We have the same issue, that we're dealing with in the town hall, and we have tons of meetings, tons of public meetings, and we hear complaints from a lot of people who are unable to actually hear what's going on. And particularly in this room, especially if you're in the room, you can't hear. If you watch it on TV, it sounds great, but in the room, you can't hear. So I don't think it's a tough problem to solve. I think it'd be pretty easy, and I encourage you to do that. We're working on a few things at Town Hall. It takes more time than it should, but we're getting there, so.
But hope, anyway. Go ahead, Rob.
Another question. The VRF system that was, I think that was in FY '26 for a while, now in FY '27. That, the number $6 million, where'd you get that number? And if it's Noresco, then that's one explanation. However, that doesn't provide the venting so that the whole school would have air conditioning. So, are you aware of that? Is that part of your plan? Is that not part of your plan?
Yep. So initially, what we had in there was replacement of the two current boilers here at the high school, and not looking at the electrification. The electrification piece was part of the Noresco project, and that is where that number comes from. And there hadn't been conversation necessarily about providing air conditioning to the whole building.
That's not a goal of the school committee to have air conditioning in all the rooms? Or you haven't brought it up?
We haven't, it hasn't been a discussion point.
So with regard to the gas boilers, how much do they cost without the electrification?
I think we had $480,000 in each of 2 years. So initially, there was one in for for FY '26, and then the second one in FY '27. And it was replaced by this.
So I guess the question, I guess I'm still confused. So this is a capital need, either replace the boilers or put a new system in. Doesn't show up on the capital plan. Either way, right?
No, it's right here.
Oh, that's, and is that,
Well, that is not the
Noresco or
gas. Yeah, that's Noresco, right.
and that's
The alternative's not in.
Okay,
So
so
the
this-
split
this-
ducts,
in
that's
this
why
version.
Rob was saying it's not vented around, it would just be in the,
Yeah, but
proximity of the vent.
Jamie's asking about the
Yeah, I know.
gas,
Well,
replacing the gas.
So how do we make that decision, right, about, I mean, the current Noresco plan does not include that. And how do we go about making the decision that's the right thing to do, or replace the boilers? Is that in the strategic plan?
Well,
I don't think the
Not
6
the
million.
boilers, but the VRF is in the strategic plan.
So the 6 million is.
It is in this.
I mean, I think we need to have a tri-board meeting where we talk in detail about each of the projects and kind of vote it. But so far, that's not the case. We even haven't talked about capital except here.
Right.
So,
But you either need to, I mean, it needs to be either that or it needs to be something else instead, right? Like you can't, what I'm hearing.
right,
you
it's
have-
$1
you have
million
to
or
chase
$6
something.
million.
Yeah.
So,
Well, but it's not $6 million necessarily if it's, because it's, I mean, if it's Carl's whole issue at the select board meeting was it's not a straight up $6 million investment because if it's a Noresco sort of situation, then there's the cost of, there's cost savings that has to be applied back to pay off the debt service. So it's not a,
The cost to do it is 6 million. You're saying the cost to finance it may not
right,
be.
right. But I think Carl's issue was it was a little misleading to have it as a $6 million capital item because it didn't tell the whole picture of,
You'd save operating costs going forward.
yes, that could be used to pay down that $6 million. That might not be used for free. So it's a little more complicated.
I get the point, but
Yeah,
it
so I
is a $6
think we do
million
need to hash it out at a higher level.
Ken, did you have capital questions?
Yeah, it's more of a general thing. The schools paid for this assessment 6 years ago, and we got it. I would hope that a similar assessment, but tailored so that our in-house personnel can keep it updated each and every year. Because I think the school administration has been handicapped by not having good facilities information. I think probably the last facilities director was moving it in the right direction, maybe too slow to really be super helpful. But I think it will be immensely helpful to the administration and the rest of the town to have current data all the time so that we don't get roof surprises like we did last year. And you basically understand what you have to spend and when. And if you don't do it well, then, that's our bad for not voting that budget to facilitate that. But by having surveys that are so many years old, it's really hard to, feel good about certain numbers that we have, even in this capital plan. And I hope they're good numbers, but unless those things are updated every year, because prices go up, prices go down, and in this current political climate, nothing's going down, it's going up. It may come back down, who knows? But it'd be really helpful to, I think, all involved if we were to engage one of those entities, but have it in such a way that our local people can keep it updated and current every year. So it gives you guys all good information.
Yep.
Thank you.
Last call for capital.
a little bit separate from capital, with regard to the gas burners and the gas boilers. And if they are at their useful life, right? And that's, so with regard to your facilities manager, does he or she have like a plan, should one of those go down in FY '26?
So we run on, it's a, I don't want to say it's a completely redundant system, but we have the two boilers now that are both up and functioning. We started the year with one boiler and needed to make some significant repairs to the second boiler and got that up and running when the season cooled off. So right today, they're both functional. If one goes down, we can operate on one for a time until we get it repaired. Getting parts for them it has become difficult, and it's taken time to make those repairs. We've had, cracked sections, et cetera. The original ask for the capital plan, as I said earlier, was $480,000 in each of 2 years to replace those boilers. And then the conversation went to, you know, let's be more efficient and electrify everything, and that's where the gas got pulled out, and the electrification replaced it.
Yeah.
In hopes that that's going to re-spark the conversation. I don't know. But to your point, Rob, the fact remains, we have 2 very old boilers that we hope will continue to get us where we need to be and continue to function.
Just another related NORESCO question, because it doesn't seem like you have all the NORESCO projects on your list. You have the LED lighting, right? But I think one of them is a generator heat pump that is for the high school, I believe.
Yeah, I didn't put any of the NORESCO stuff, I did not put in. That was on, the town side was dealing with all of that.
Okay, well,
So that, I mean, even the VRF system, Stephen had put that in. And the LED lighting pieces, that was, Stephen had put all of that information in.
okay, we can follow up then, but, you know, if we're doing a capital plan, right? The capital plan should show every capital project that we're proposing. They don't all have to be funded out of our budget. You know, there can be outside sources as well, and the capital plan should be identifying what the funding source is, which this, you know, has a whole half of the sheet to identify where the
Right.
funding's coming from. So it just seems to me that we should be putting everything on the list, and I assume, is somebody on the school side paying attention to NORESCO? And what's on the list and what's not on the list?
I mean, I am through Climate Resiliency Committee where we discuss it every month, so, yes.
We've all also been present at the multiple
But your
tri-board meetings where it's been discussed, so I think
Your
we're all
facilities
certainly-
guy is completely up to speed on the NORESCO project?
That I don't know. I can't speak for him.
I would encourage you to see if that's the case, just because we're finding similar question we asked on the town side, and the facilities department did not seem very up to speed on NORESCO because it's treated as kind of an isolated thing and not integrated, you know, across the town, so.
And even so, they're still hiring a consultant to redo the school dudes, bring that stuff up to date. That, it started with a W. Rick's hiring a consultant.
Oh,
Hired a
Wilson's,
2 buildings that we already know about.
right,
That's
not
what
the
came up with
schools.
Not Rick.
No, I'm
Rick
just saying,
Clark, Rick Clark.
you would think it's common, the problems are not the same, but there's commonality to the problems.
Well, it kind of,
But in watching that, they never said they were updating school dude. They wanted to extinguish school dude.
Right, he's gonna put it in a different system. We need that data. We have stuff needs maintenance, and when's that maintenance need to occur, and what's the cost of that maintenance? Wherever that lives, we have that on the school side somehow, and Rick is taking that over on their side. I'm just saying, school committee people, need to have the same thoughts that we had when Rick came before us and said that. We all, as a tri-board, need to make sure that, again, we have a list of capital projects, and then we have this maintenance capacity of the facilities people, wherever they live. Rick Clark on the town side, and then the new person there. We need to make sure this stuff is up to date, so we're not sitting here in another 5 years looking at each other going, wow, we have, things not up to date and things are breaking that we didn't realize was happening.
so another question. So I think all of your school projects add up to 1.4, 1.5 million for FY '26. Have you had discussions about whether all that's actually going to end up in the capital budget at town meeting?
Have we had discussions
Yes, with the select board or town manager?
with the town manager? I have, certainly. The select board has not voted on the capital plan yet.
Right, right. So maybe Catherine, you can tell us, so there's 4.7 million in capital projects? I don't know if we have 4.7 million to spend on capital projects.
Right, 4.7, and then just over 3 million is the use of free cash. And then 1.5 million would be a bond for the fire truck.
Okay, so you feel pretty good about this list and that we can cover it between free cash and the bond?
Well, I mean, it's being reviewed right now by the select board. I did just send you all also just a breakdown in terms of free cash, just to, just to help you with your decisions about everything. In terms of, if once, breaking down the free cash, that where it puts us at the end of the day.
Yeah, and I think you also told us that you had identified 242,000 of kind of leftover money in the capital projects that rolls into the stabilization.
Yes, but I was also, I did not attend the select board meeting on Monday night, but there was discussion about keeping that money in the capital plan for the potential that there's some items that they're coming in higher than, that because of, just delays in getting them with the fire truck, that even though we have a 1.5 number on that, in terms of it could take 2 years to get that, and they're not necessarily holding those numbers right now.
So you're saying the 242,000 is not available for FY '26?
It would be available, but it currently is not being applied.
But we have enough to get to the 4.7, is what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, with the 1.5 ban, which I believe that they, a bond, which I believe that they are planning on putting that on the warrant. It is currently on the draft warrant.
Okay. I just encourage you to stay on top of that whole conversation, right? Because it could be tough to get all that funded this year, but we'll see.
Okay, I think it's time to move on to the override calculator, which is the final item on our agenda for this evening, I believe. We received a copy on Monday. Is that still the most updated copy? Do you want to pull it up on the screen, just for Zoom ability?
Brought hard copies, if that might be.
I have a copy. Does anyone want a paper copy or screen?
I should talk about that.
Do you want a paper copy?
Yeah, I might take one. They're bigger than mine. Easy to do.
Sure. Well, I brought a bunch.
Thank you.
You can share one.
You guys?
Good, thank you. Yes, thank you, Tom.
Assumptions within the supplemental document. Actually, let me ask, are there There were some assumptions included in the supplemental documents, helpful for us to go through that. Have you seen them? Where would you like us to start? I don't want to cover anything that you're already familiar with.
So I've seen them, and I think generally speaking, we're familiar with this format, but I would say, I mean, primarily, I'd like to cover our shortfall and then our future plan. But does anyone have a requested starting point?
I mean, the headline is our current stabilization fund takes us through FY '28, which is in line with what we discussed last year. There's small, but there's some balance in there, so we would be able to get through FY '28 before needing another override.
And that was passed in FY '21, but went into effect in '22.
In '23, it actually went into effect. So May of 2022 is when we voted it.
So it goes into, for FY '23, it started.
Well, it wasn't needed in '23. It was needed in '24.
But it hit the tax rolls.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like
Yeah,
where
so
they have
that's-
year one, that should be
Yes.
year zero. But as Sasha just said, they get out to FY '28 even with a small amount.
So Sasha, one thing that just jumps out to me is we readjusted the revenue and expense assumptions, and it actually creates a smaller structural deficit, which was, I guess, a little surprising to me. 75 basis points was the original gap that was, the override was funding. So you guys went back through and you relooked at the assumptions, and you're kind of confident with that, as confident as one can be with assumptions?
Going back and looking at the revenue year-over-year increases, 1.5%, 9%, 5%, 4%, 2.9%, and so it's fluctuated significantly, and so our assumption going forward is 3% revenue increase year-over-year, and similarly have adjusted our budget increase to 3.5 year-over-year to ensure that we can make it through FY '28.
So this is a budget that only reflects the appropriated budget. Doesn't reflect your total spending.
Correct.
And have you taken that into account? That you've got another significant amount of money? I mean, your overall spending is increasing at 5% or more a year. But your appropriated budget is only increasing at 3.5, which means you're tapping increasing amounts of outside resources, which may or may not be available.
I'm not clear on what your question is.
But as we were asking about the balances on the accounts, that's really why we were asking is,
Yeah.
were they hitting bone? And they're
Right.
not. They do have the money.
So, Tom, what's your total spending, 44 for FY '26? 44 million?
44 million for fiscal '26? Yeah, it would be about that if we take the
So let's say it's,
appropriated budget and all outside sources, including state, federal grants, and including FEFs?
4 or 5, yeah.
Sure.
so I'm just saying there's at least another 4 million outside of your appropriated budget that you need to think about because, you know, your 40 million is only going to go up by 3.5% a year. But your total spending is going up at 5 plus 5.5, 6 a year. So that $4 million outside of the appropriated budget is going to carry, you know, half of your increase. So it's not a small number.
Yeah, I mean, the two main levers that we have, right, are to reduce spending or to increase what we're withdrawing from those revolving accounts. We're looking at both over the long term. Right now, at least for the next, past FY '26 to get to FY '28, we're comfortable with that. But we would have to either adjust one of those two over the next couple of years.
Yeah, so I think our concern is, you know, is it reasonable to continue to increase your budget at 5.5% a year? are we likely to have the resources to do that?
We're projecting that we're only going to increase 3.5% over the next couple of years.
But that's the point I was trying to make you. That's not actually how it's working, because.
That's not how it's been historically. We recognize that it would have to be lower going forward in order to make the stabilization fund last through FY '28.
But this year's budget is going up by, what, 5.9%, Tom?
5.7, I think, but you're in the range.
Do you see where I'm going with this?
Yeah, our intention is to reduce the spend
In
over
fu-
time.
In
the-
future years?
In future years.
Even though you haven't been able to do that to date?
We started to look at it last year. We did not because we were in a contract negotiation year, so it was hard for us to do that at the same time as we would be renegotiating. Now that that's past us, we're able to better, one, understand and project out what the cost would be, and also in a better position to identify if we need to make reductions, where would those come from? Or we've increased what we've taken from the revolving accounts in the last couple of years. There is greater opportunity to take more from there, which would help us avoid potential reductions. So there's not a straight answer of, are we going to do one or the other? We're really going to pull on both levers. We're going to reduce the spend, and we're probably going to take more from revolving accounts.
So I'm just saying, when you step back and you look at what's going on, you know, you've continued to add staff, right? We have 10 more staff than we did 2 years ago. Your budgets are increased this year 5.5%, next year 5.9 or 5.7, whatever it is. But your resources are not going up, and certainly not going up on the town appropriation side. And there's a gap that's going to continue to grow and grow and grow, and that's why we had this whole discussion about the outside revenue streams, because, you know, you may have accumulated a lot of money in there, you know, for safekeeping, so to speak, but the income to support that may not be there on an ongoing basis. Right?
And how quickly do you deplete those,
Yeah, is it 1 year, 2 years? I mean,
And then you're in trouble.
Yeah.
So it's more than fair to say that this point is not lost on us, and we have been really very thoughtful about getting us to fiscal '26, and we have a pretty tight eye on '27 and '28 for this, you know, for this very reason. The fact that we are using and becoming more reliant on outside sources is a concern. But as I mentioned earlier, what we are tapping into are reliable and replenishable funds, that we're not putting reoccurring costs on things, for example, school choice. We didn't talk about our school choice fund really at all, because those revenues, the number of students, that is going down. The number of students that we're participating in the school choice program, the number of is declining. We're not bringing students in the same rate that we're graduating them. So we didn't talk about, you didn't see really any presentation from us about relying on school choice. So, because we need to walk ourselves down from funds that are not replenishing in any sort of dependable way. So the type of things that we are relying on, as to Sasha's point, to put a fine point on that, but is really reductions, to take a very sharp, you know, look at necessary efficiencies, you know, district-wide, the type of things that we were able to afford, both certainly during the COVID years, which I think we all got, you know, accustomed to having, you know, lots of things that became our necessities to get us through those times, but those monies are gone. Fiscal '26 is the first year we do not have 1 cent of COVID dollars. That hasn't been lost on us in planning to get to this year anyways. So your points are well taken. They are shared. And the type of things that I know we as the administration and working with the whole school committee, never mind very deep conversation with the budget subcommittee, is what are we going to do to continue to rely less on things like the stabilization fund, to be able to not to take the big numbers that we're looking at, but how do we balance reductions with available resources with demands of students and families. So That's not precisely an answer for you, but
No,
it's
a
not, it's
great
not a
answer.
point that's lost on us.
It's a great answer, and, you know, I appreciate how difficult it is and how challenging it is. But I guess I'm just sitting here having, you know, been through 6 hours of presentations on the budget, and I can't think of anything that you've actually reduced. I'm sure you have. It hasn't, I see you've added more funding to your budget to cover some of the shortfalls that you were experiencing, but that's not, you know, tapping into additional funding gets you to the budget you want to get to, but that's not a reduction. The budget isn't reduced. The budget has not been reduced.
No, the budget has grown at a lesser pace than anticipated. It has grown at a far lesser pace than the administrators had requested. Obviously, that wasn't, you know, it's important for them to build from the bottom up.
Sure.
But those aren't necessarily things that we're probably ever going to be able to afford.
It's kind of life in the budget world, right?
Indeed it is.
You know, it's good to talk about what you could be doing, would be doing if you had the money, but at the end of the day. So, you know, I look at your, you know, salary schedule, you know, it's whatever, 4%, 3%, it's going to be in that range. So short of cutting positions, you're never going to get to the kind of budget you're talking about in future years. So I'm concerned. I mean, I just think we keep having this conversation every year. We started it with all the extra COVID funds. We kept saying, you know, yeah, it's great you can add all these people on, and, you know, there's a need there, it's special circumstances and all that, but it doesn't seem, I was expecting to see a drop in FTEs. What I'm seeing is a continuing increase in FTEs. And I don't know how you support that, honestly.
Well, I think we have tried, you know, earnestly to explain why the FTEs have gone up the way they have while certain budgets have gone down, because there's an economy of scale there. And that, you know, hiring additional staff to support student needs is actually less expensive for us than sending students out at some fairly expensive, you know, out-of-district placements. So, you know, that's a model that's one of the models that we're looking at with a pretty sharp pencil about how to make necessary reductions while continuing to balance the needs of the students that are in front of us. But the point is not lost.
So I was just going to add in some of the things that the budget subcommittee is planning on talking about more long-term that we couldn't really do as quickly about the FY26 budget, but it includes things like, as Tom just mentioned, the Department of Student Services, you know, his projections out 5 years, I mean, that could be $1 million savings over time. We'll see if it pans out.
Yeah.
But if we can keep kids in-house and save the out-of-district costs, that could be a really big savings. And it's not going to be today, and I know you're laughing and you don't believe
No,
me.
I'm
But
not.
that's an example of something.
No, I appreciate he's really trying to think creatively about that, but
Right. And another thing we're talking about, again, that isn't going to be implemented right away, but we really need to look at class sizes, I think, across the district. And that's something that's hard to implement, and we might have to, you know, it might take a little while to figure out how best to do that, and it's really challenging when we have 2 elementary schools, you know, to talk about things like reducing to 5 sections, and it will be easier when we're in, you know, hopefully a combined school that has a little more flexibility and things like that. So we can talk about these grades that have 102 students. Maybe we could get by with 5 sections, you know, and that won't be for 5 or 6 years, 5 to 7 years when we open a new building. But we've also talked about other things that we might be able to do with class sizes before then. Other things we've talked about are just other modeling of our services that could lead to cost savings and efficiencies that are just going to take some time to do, and other savings that we might have, that we might incur when we have a new elementary building. You know, we pay a ton in utilities and things like that, you know, when we have a new building, and they're going up.
they'll go up in a new building. Same thing when we built this building.
But having one new building we'll have, I believe, some cost savings over maintaining 2 older buildings.
Make me believe of that. But
Okay,
you can
well,
have way more space than you have now. Yeah,
Yes,
you
but
can
it'll
have
be a
air
much more
conditioning, and
efficient,
you're gonna have air
energy
conditioning,
efficient
right?
building.
Air conditioning you don't pay for now, you'll pay for that in the future. So I get, I think it's all great. All I'm trying to just say is, from a high-level picture, it doesn't look great. Two things to keep in mind. It's the 400 million in capital projects that we're facing right now. And that's going to put pressure on operating budgets one way or the other, right? Because people in this community are only going to support so many overrides, right? And your future depends on an override. And I think it's going to be a lot harder to get an override than it has been in the past. And if the priorities that the FinCom went through, the prioritization of where to spend money in the future is any indication, school overrides are not on the top of the list.
Yep, yeah, we do understand that.
And I guess, Kate, the only other thing that really concerns me, having been through this budget cycle, is benefits and the explosive growth of the cost of the benefits. So again, you say 3.5, but if your benefit number's going up by 20%, that's going to be hard to, I don't know what's modeled in over this.
Our growth right now conservatively is 4.4%. We're modeling out that it's going to be 3.5% year over year, so to get us through that FY '28, it's 4.2,
I'm saying like the
3.8.
benefit number, if the benefit number goes up 20% next year.
Yeah, no, I understand.
That's why that concerns me on both sides.
Yeah, no,
We're people in capital.
Yeah, we fully recognize we will not be able to spend at the same rate with the same,
I know you
level of
guys do great
services.
work, so
Yeah.
I'm stating the obvious. It's just what strikes me.
Yeah.
having sat through this.
yeah, we're projecting our growth lower than our rate of spend right now. That's right.
And with the benefit example, so goes the town, so goes we all. I mean, this is not our benefit number, it's the town's benefit number, right? So it's a concern that we all share.
Go ahead, Bob.
If, as an example, in the Doyen School, you had only the first, second, and third grade, and then at Winthrop, you had 4 and 5. Would that perhaps create some efficiency that would reduce costs?
I would bet,
I don't know that we financially modeled that. I think the issue is we're constrained by the 2 physical buildings right now. That'd be incredibly disruptive to our students. I think we're incredibly, where Kate was going in a new building, we have much greater opportunity both for adjustments for scale, for growing class size, shrinking class size, that we can significantly minimize the cost of those kinds of things. But that's years out.
You mentioned class size,
Yeah.
because I would think if you had similar classes together in one school,
Yeah.
maybe it would be easier to deal with that class size issue, which you, in fact, you had brought up. at one
Yeah,
point.
yeah, very difficult for us to change right now. But yes, I mean, certainly something that could be done. It's hard to do, you think about the change for students moving from one school to another.
It's certainly something that we can consider looking at over time. It's not something that we could pull off in one year. It would have to be something that be planned out, but certainly.
But we don't necessarily have to wait for a new building. It's something that we could do over in the next couple of years, or at least talk about.
other override calculator questions? Anything that the school committee wants to call out pertaining to the override calculator?
I'd actually like do you have a formal opinion on year-over-year revenue growth that you're in line with, or have discussed with Select Board that we should be using so that we have a consistent assumption?
I mean, typically I would defer to Catherine for that answer. That is my answer, but I don't know if anyone else has a different position there.
As a board, you don't.
Sasha,
have
you mean
consensus?
something other than 3%?
Yeah,
I think 3% is the right number.
that position shared.
I would
That's-
agree with that. I mean, I think, obviously it's 2.5% every year plus new growth, and once in a while we get, something big happens, but it doesn't happen every year.
Yeah, it's been so different year over year for the last, several years, so we want to make sure we're in line with what the other boards are
I think there were
putting in
some
for assumptions.
aberrations due to the pandemic pandemic, so like, everybody got a boat. So you had a bunch of, extra taxes there, but that doesn't really flow through that original calculator, right? It flows through free cash. Now we fund some capital with that, but it's hard from an operating perspective, it doesn't really, you don't really see it.
I mean, I'd personally go with 2.5 and then take the win on the other years, but I guess I'm conservative.
All right, thank you.
So, Emily, do you want to vote it so that we give them a number? I mean, we could all just decide here.
Sure.
You want 2.5?
Revenue growth?
Yeah. Yeah, annual growth.
Yeah. I think it's a great idea.
2.5?
What do others think?
2.6, be a little generous?
Hard at 2.5, so I would say 3, but.
I'm more okay with what they're standing behind here, having it come down. It was a little bit, the last time when, Greg was here, it was 75 basis points, but it was on higher numbers. I was quite skeptical and kind of, was pretty clear that, I said, keep that spread, because that's the thing. I think, if you get 2.5, a little bit of new growth, a little bit of growth in others, I think I'm more on the 3 camp.
Thank you. Great.
Dana?
I would also personally go a little lower than 3. Maybe not flat down at 2.5, but.
Can I just add, I'm not sure how you can vote like a general blanket growth amount, given, you're not taking anything into consideration with the economy. I do a lot of analysis on the growth. In fact, the growth has grown over the last 2 years. This year it was up, there's growth in terms of the revenues, Proposition 2.5, and then we have the local receipts, state aid, we level fund, and then it's made up, both the town and the school are made correct at this special town meeting. But, I think that if the school committee is looking for like a format, I think you have to start with a historical picture in terms of what the revenues, have been for the school. And that type of data we do have, and then, do some projections going forward as well. But, I was at a state meeting earlier this week with DLS doing financial forecasting, and they were talking about, in their cherry sheets for forecasting, they're putting in negative numbers. So, to vote a percent going forward that's, I can see if you're starting the budget season and you're saying, the guideline's gonna be 2.5% or 3% for that year. But just to make a general statement that could skew, the plans that the school committee has at this time, I'm just gonna warn against it.
I thought the question was, did we support the assumption for projections in future years at 3% revenue growth? Not, are we guaranteeing it?
No, that was not my question. My question is, does your board have a formal position on future revenue growth?
Formal position, meaning,
Meaning you have discussed with select board what you anticipate future growth to be. If you haven't discussed.
We have
that's
not.
my answer. Yeah.
Yeah.
you mean like what we would estimate for future growth?
Yeah, it sounds like that's not a discussion you're having.
Sasha, have you seen the people on the select board and our board? I mean, I'm with Catherine a little bit on that. Our guess at new growth, I mean.
Well,
That's the answer I was looking for.
and we got a public sample here.
3%?
No, I'm fine with I'm fine support, not that we're being asked to support it, but I'm fine supporting it. What I'm saying is, Sasha's asking, do we have a forward-looking view on what we think?
We're using 3%. If you have all.
If we thought that was
for the last
nuts.
9 months been saying, we think it's gonna be 4%, I don't wanna use the wrong number. It sounds like that's not been a
No.
discussion, so that's fine.
And as you can tell from our quick little sample around the room, we're all over the board. So I would say that, no, we don't have an official position. We won't vote. And Catherine is our subject matter expert here.
Thank you.
I think you're safe to use 3. I thought almost everybody here said 3. So, I think if you're looking for some reassurance that that's a good number to use, I think that's a good number to use. I don't think you'll be disappointed by having something coming in lower than that, and hopefully you do a little better. Only helps, right? If it's higher.
Okay. We have covered, I believe, everything on our agendas for both nights. Diana?
Can I add a couple real quick odds and ends?
Sure.
Okay. Super quick. I want to just go to slide 19 in the presentation. You don't have to pull it up necessarily. It's the one that had enrollment by school year because there was a question on that yesterday. And I just want to make sure everybody understands that that slide represents kind of budgeting tools that the administrators used for their schools. It's not for the 25-26 year, it's not necessarily reflective of actual projections. I would still recommend that if you're looking at actual projections, you refer to the NESDEC enrollment study from 2022. Even for this year, we're right in the ballpark for what that study has recommended.
And you'll have to do a new one as part of the school project, right?
Exactly, yep. And then next, has anybody signed up for our school committee newsletters?
I think they actually come to maybe?
Everybody's getting them?
For the what? I'm sorry?
They might come to the FinCom distro, or maybe I'm confusing the library. I probably could sign up the FinCom distro for your school committee newsletters. I don't see why I couldn't.
Okay,
So I will do that.
okay. I think that would be great, because we work hard on them and have a lot of good information in them, including a lot of we have like budget snippets leading up to the budget. We announce when it's going on the website, which is the initial budget went on the website the first week in February. And then, of course, we finalized our position on the budget on Thursday, and that's why the revised, updated version was available to you early this week. So I just, again, wanted to put a plug in there, but I can send you how to sign up for that. And that's about it. Thank you.
So just a couple of override questions. I kind of was thinking we were going to talk about FY '27, whether the school committee is thinking of looking for an override that year or FY '28, and just playing through also for the new school building, whether you're going to need a feasibility study that's an override, and then also the Noresco $6 million project next year. Is that in your plans for an override for capital? And then, I think Kate probably knows, we've got a lot of projects that are all going to be overrides, so there's going to be a cadence of overrides, and if the public safety building gets out of court this year, that's another override. And then, of course, your big school project. So have you talked about that? Have you thought about the cadence of them? I see a request here, or mention of a 5-year override. Have you considered like a 1-year override, so that we kind of have smaller?
Yeah, the 5-year override that's referenced there in the FY '29, that's a holdover from FY '23. We are meeting tomorrow night, actually, to talk about future overrides, both timing and amount, as an input to the strategic plan. So I don't have the specifics for you. We can share it as a follow-up, but to your pointed question there in terms of like the timing, yes, we quickly brought up in other meetings the frequency of them. The last couple were 5 years apart. We're going to discuss whether we want to continue to do that. Some of it will be based on the dollar amount, but we haven't gotten there yet. And then the second part of your question was override for.
Feasibility study, do you think, that's part of your conversation, right?
Yeah, we haven't hit that yet.
Capital, again, part of your conversation?
I've not been part of that one.
Well, we got the $6 million.
Yeah, I don't know that one.
Talk about that as a tri board or with the town manager. I think we need to have a bigger conversation about the plan for that.
Well, and to clarify, so the $6 million
It's not an FY.
57,000, that was a number that Noresco gave as an estimate, that's not like, there's no actual project plan for that within the scope of the town or school right now, right? That was just a NORESCO estimate?
That's correct.
Correct.
And in fact, we should,
Right.
it's important to leave the meeting around that with the awareness that that was not the request that we made. It was the request to help re-spark the conversation of the whole nature of electrification, right? The request that we made was to replace the two gas burners, gas boilers.
So maybe we could revisit this during Bean County?
Yeah.
Because they'll have time to think about the overrides and the cadence of the overrides. And,
The feasibility study, again, is next fall, right? The funding of the feasibility study.
so you don't know when.
Hopefully, yeah.
She said that earlier.
Oh, hopefully.
No, I understand, I'm just saying,
Yeah.
that's why I heard that.
And the level set, that calendar starts July 1st, right, is when, just wanted to make sure. Okay, last comments, remarks, notes, updates? Any new or old business from the Finance Committee since we met last night? Okay.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
Motion to adjourn by Ken, second by Leah. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 8 in favor, 0 opposed. Thank you, everyone on the school committee, for all your time with us over the last 2 nights. I know we're a difficult bunch, but we mean well.
Yes, thank you.